The Grim Reaper is known as the being who guides the souls of the dead. The god of death had declared that any Reaper who manages to guide 10,000 souls would be rewarded with a single wish. After some time, one such Reaper stood before the god of death, who asked him if he had finally succeeded in collecting the 10,000 souls. The Reaper, named Kai, answered in the affirmative. The god of death then assured him that he would fulfill his promise and grant him any wish he desired. Kai's wish was surprising, as he asked to quit his job as a Grim Reaper. The god of death was taken aback by this request, explaining to him that giving up being a Reaper meant that his very reason for existence would disappear, and his fate would be complete annihilation. But Kai, who had reached an unbearable level of exhaustion, replied that this fate was perfectly fine with him. Upon his request, the god of death agreed to grant it, and in that moment, Kai's existence was supposed to vanish completely. But contrary to his expectations, he found himself opening his eyes again. He was lying on a bed, while a man and a woman eagerly called him Young Master Seian, expressing their joy that he had finally regained consciousness. The woman hurried to inform the Count, while the man tried to check on his condition and ask if he felt any discomfort. Kai looked at Seian's body, with its white hair and purple eyes, bewildered and wondering to himself why he had returned to life after wishing for annihilation. To understand what is happening, the scene goes back in time 17 years, to a dark forest at night, where two armed men managed to find a runaway slave and her child. The men spoke rudely to the mother, asserting that she was mistaken if she thought she could escape from them. The mother tearfully begged them, admitting her mistake, which was driven by her fear that her child would live a life of slavery like her. She pleaded with them to kill her if they wished, but to leave her child alone. One of the men coldly told her not to worry, they wouldn't kill the child, then added with a cynical smile, wondering why they would kill a valuable asset. He explained in a harsh tone that they would take the child and enslave him to death, just as her life had been. The mother collapsed as she imagined the brutal fate awaiting her baby, whom she had hoped to give a dignified life as a human being. In the depths of her despair, she wondered about the reason for their miserable lives, and raised her voice in prayer, pleading with any power, whether a god, an angel, or even a devil, to intervene and save her child. In that moment, a mysterious man with a majestic appearance emerged, calling the mother by her name, Miru. The two soldiers were surprised by his appearance and asked him who he was and who sent him. The man ignored them and politely told them that he didn't have much time, and that he would speak with the woman first and then answer their questions. The soldiers felt a cold shiver run down their spines, as if they were on the verge of death. The mysterious man strode confidently past the terrified soldiers and stood before Miru, who was kneeling on the ground, clutching her child. He offered her a deal, promising to grant her one wish, and in return, she had to give him one thing he wanted. He then revealed his request, asking her to give him her soul. As Miru held her child, she whispered her final wish to the mysterious man standing before her. After listening to her, the man, surrounded by a celestial aura, declared that he understood her desire and that the contract between them was sealed. At that moment, a smile of contentment appeared on the mother's face as she hugged her baby, before falling lifeless to the ground, while the man took the child in his arms. When the soldiers saw the scene, they yelled at the man, demanding to know what he was doing, insisting that the child was their property, and ordering him to leave it and go immediately. But the man, now holding the child, calmly apologized and told them he could no longer hand him over. The soldiers became enraged and decided there was no choice but to kill him for interfering in their affairs, and they rushed towards him to attack. But before they could reach him, they suddenly froze in place, discovering with horror that they were unable to move their bodies. The man then calmly stated the second rule of the Grim Reapers, which stipulates that whoever interferes with his work, he has the right to kill them. The soldiers panicked as their bodies began to move against their will, and they screamed, begging him to stop. By an unseen force, they were compelled to point their swords at each other, and in moments they delivered fatal blows to one another while screaming for him to stop. After the soldiers fell, the man stood holding the child, looking at Miru's lifeless body. A faint light emanated from her body, which was her soul, and ascended towards the sky, as the man told us that this was the 9,999th soul he had collected. He looked at the baby, who was extending his small hand towards his face, and muttered to himself that he had taken on a troublesome wish, then walked away, realizing he didn't have much time left. 16 years later, a young red-haired girl called out to someone as Appa and asked if he was home, and a voice from inside replied that he was. The girl, named Jazeth, entered carrying a basket and complained that Kai didn't greet her warmly. Kai replied coolly, asking if he looked like an old man who couldn't hear well, assuring her he could hear her even if she called him softly. He then added that it was illogical to greet her warmly every time, especially since she visited him several times a day. Jazeth protested, saying anyone else would be happy to have her visit and would welcome her warmly. so Kai coldly suggested she go to them then. Jouseth became flustered and told him that's not what she meant, finally admitting she just wished Kai would show her more affection. Meanwhile, Kai was busy carving a wooden statue, ignoring her words. Jouseth threw herself on the sofa, but Kai immediately scolded her, ordering her not to lie down before washing her hands and feet, which made her complain that he was a very strict person. He then asked her why she was visiting. She told him that her mother was not well and that her left arm had been hurting since last night and was still bothering her even after waking up. Kai stopped carving the wooden statue and promised he would stop by their house later to check on her mother. Jouseth thanked him profusely, expressing her deep gratitude for his constant help, then told him she was going to the mountain to gather some herbs. After Jouseth left, Kai went to her house. Her mother, whom Kai called Mi-ru in his mind, greeted him and offered him some bread she had just made. Kai looked at her and then snapped his fingers, and the woman immediately froze in place and lost consciousness, before falling to the floor like a lifeless doll. Kai approached her lifeless body, examining it and thinking to himself that making her out of cheap wood was a mistake, as the wood had already started to rot, while he was using a mysterious power from his hand to examine the cause of the decay. Jouseth suddenly returned and found him in that state over her mother's body, asking him in shock what he was doing. Kai thought to himself that he had made a mistake, as he was so focused on the repair process that he didn't hear her coming. Jouseth assumed he had come to treat her mother as he had promised. Kai confirmed that she was the one who asked him to come. Jouseth was surprised by how quickly he had arrived and noticed her mother wasn't home, then wondered about the large doll lying on the floor, pointing out that it looked a lot like her mother. The shocking threads of truth began to come together in Jouseth's mind. She connected the doll with her mother's complaint of pain in her left arm. She recalled what she had told him earlier about her mother, and hesitantly asked Kai if this doll was really her mother. As he remained silent, her horror grew. She pressed him with the question while he stayed quiet, and she begged him not to tell her that this piece of wood was the cause of her mother's pain. Kai's silence confirmed her suspicions, and she asked in panic if her mother was just a doll. She realized the full, horrifying truth. What she thought was treatment was nothing but replacing parts in a doll. Then her shock widened to include everyone in the village, wondering if Kai had healed everyone in the same way. She backed away, begging him to deny it all. Kai decided he could no longer hide the truth and that he had to be honest with her, especially since she was now mature enough to understand that what he did was logical. He snapped his fingers again, revealing to her a horrific scene that showed the truth about all the villagers. Jouseth asked him in shock if they were all dolls. Kai confirmed to her that it was exactly as she saw it, and that the person she knew as her mother and all the inhabitants of this village were nothing but dolls of his creation. This shocking confession prompted Jouseth to ask him about his true identity. Kai began to explain what happened, clarifying that 16 years ago, her mother made a deal with him, betting her soul right before she died. Her mother's wish was for her daughter Jouseth to live a life where she wouldn't be harmed by people, and not to live a humiliating life like hers, but to be loved by everyone. Kai added that he knew that even saints couldn't live a life filled only with love among humans, and for that reason, he created an entire village just for her, a village that would ensure she would never be hurt. Jouseth broke down and asked him in despair if he meant her entire life had been a lie. She wondered what she was supposed to believe in and love now, if her mother, everyone in the village, and even he, were just a fake puppet show. In the midst of her despair, she began to doubt her own existence, wondering if she herself was a real person. She asked Kai directly if she was also a doll of his creation. Kai reassured her and confirmed that she was not a doll, reminding her that he created the entire village for her. But Jouseth could no longer believe anything he said. In a desperate attempt to prove her reality, she grabbed a dagger and demanded proof that she wasn't a doll. She slightly cut her neck, and when she saw the blood flowing, she confirmed with relief that she had been a real human all along. She fell into his arms and asked him why he did all this. He responded with a question, asking if her life up to that moment had been miserable. Jouseth admitted that she had been happy, but she realized that all that happiness was a lie. She couldn't bear the thought that everyone she loved was fake. She looked at him sadly and offered to make a deal with him as well. She repeated that she wanted to make a deal too. Kai warned her that the price of the deal was her soul, but she insisted on going forward, so he told her to state her wish. She told him her wish, saying that he was the only real person in her life, and if he also forgot her, no one in this world would be left to remember her. So she begged him to remember her forever, and tearfully asked if her request was too much. Her words touched Kai, so he agreed to the deal, stating that the contract was sealed. Jouseth thanked him with relief, then fell to the ground after her life departed, her soul becoming the 10,000th soul collected by Kai. After Jouseth's death, Kai burned down the village he had built for her, believing it had become a useless place without her, and it quickly went up in flames. At that moment, Kai noticed the god of death, Shanos, who observed that Kai seemed sadder than usual. Shanos wondered if Kai had special feelings for that child, but Kai denied it. Kai asked Shanos to fulfill his promise. After Shanos pretended to have forgotten, he laughed, saying that of course he remembered. After seeing Kai's angry face, Kai reminded him of the promise he had made. to grant him one wish upon guiding the 10,000th soul. Shanos explained that he made this a general rule to improve the efficiency of other Reapers, then agreed to grant Kai's wish and asked him to state it. Kai's wish was to quit his job. He repeated his request again. Shanos was surprised and reminded him that giving up being a Reaper meant his annihilation. But Kai replied that he had already faced death 10,000 times. And when Shanos asked if he was tired, Kai confirmed it. It is revealed here that Kai was a unique Reaper. When a human soul is chosen to become a Reaper, it loses all its memories and transforms into a Grim Reaper, but Kai retained all his memories. This difference is what led him to adopt the Deal's approach in his work. Instead of forcing souls to follow him or leaving them to perish, he would grant them their last wish to lead them peacefully, allowing even souls who died unjustly to accept their fate. But these human feelings were constantly draining and hurting him, making him feel exhausted faster than others. Returning to the present, Shanos asked Kai one last time if he wanted to reconsider, but Kai insisted on his wish. Shanos agreed to grant him his wish, and Kai thanked him. Shanos warned him not to regret it later, then bid him farewell with the cryptic words, "See you again." Kai was puzzled by these words, believing he would never see him again after he perished. But instead of annihilation, he felt a heaviness in his body and found himself hearing voices around him. Doctors were discussing a patient's condition, saying that his mere breathing was a miracle. Then suddenly, one of them noticed that the patient, named Seian, had moved. Voices rose in the room, and someone announced that the young master had opened his eyes. Kai woke up in the body of a young nobleman, confused and wondering about his identity as he looked at the people gathered around his bed. While the doctor was assuring those around Seian's bed that his life was not in danger despite his injuries, an angry man with white hair attacked him and grabbed him by his clothes, calling him a pathetic son and asking how he could do this without thinking of their feelings. Another young man tried to stop him, telling his father that Seian was still sick, while the father wondered if his son ever thought about them at all. Kai, now in Seian's body, interrupted the man's outburst to ask who he was. Everyone was shocked by his question, so Kai repeated his inquiry about the man's identity and why he had suddenly hit him. After this incident, the doctor concluded that Seian had lost his memory due to a severe blow to his head. When Seian's father, Count Shuritan, asked about a cure, the doctor replied that there was no solution but to wait for his memory to return naturally. His older brother, Lucian Shuritan, then asked if there were any other problems, and the doctor reassured him that Seian's physical condition was surprisingly good and there were no life-threatening injuries. Kai realized at that moment that he had entered the body of this person named Seian, and concluded that the one responsible for all this was the god of death, Shanos. When his brother Lucian approached him to ask how he was, Kai replied coldly, telling him to leave the room and stop asking useless questions. He also asked his father and the doctor to leave, reasoning that their loud voices were giving him a headache, and demanding they all get out. Faced with this strange behavior, everyone decided to let him rest, and left the room. As soon as he was alone, Kai called out for Shanos, who appeared before him instantly. Shanos cheerfully asked if he was looking for him. Kai confronted him angrily, asking the meaning of what had happened, to which Shanos coolly replied that he had granted his wish. Shanos explained that Kai's wish was to end his life as a Grim Reaper, which is exactly what he did. This twisted interpretation angered Kai so much that he asked if he could hit him. Kai then asked about the fate of the body's original owner, and Shanos told him that he had died. Shanos explained that the boy was destined to die in an accident, and the moment his soul left his body, he inserted Kai's soul in its place, describing the timing as perfect. Kai didn't understand why he was being forced to live in a human body, so Shanos revealed his true motive with a wide grin, saying it wouldn't be fun if Kai's existence simply vanished. And when Kai asked if he did all this just for fun, Shanos answered in the affirmative. Before disappearing, Shanos wished Kai good luck in his new, fun life, leaving Kai shouting at him, trying to stop him from leaving. After Shanos left Kai drowning in his anger, he decided not to appear before him for a while until he calmed down. After several days had passed, Kai was still angry because Shanos didn't appear even when he called him, so he decided to cut ties with him completely and go his own way. During his stay at the mansion, Kai noticed something that caught his attention, which was that all the servants trembled in fear and avoided looking at him whenever they saw him. This led him to conclude that the original owner of the body, Seian, must have been a detestable and abusive person. One day, he saw a young maid, the same girl who had been bringing him his meals, trip while carrying a bucket of water and fall to the ground. The girl, named Paik, was overcome with intense terror and began to apologize hysterically as if expecting a terrible punishment. Kai approached her and asked her why she had such a fearful expression on her face, causing the girl to scream in sheer terror. It becomes clear through a flashback that Seian Shuritan, the second son of the Count, was known for his angelic beauty in his youth, but his true nature didn't take long to emerge. Records revealed his cruelty. He had burned the eyes of a maid just because she dared to smile at him when he was only 11 years old. Since then, many servants who worked for him suffered injuries, disfigurements, and beatings that nearly killed them, and it was common for them to be fired in a pitiful state. Because of this cruelty, everyone nicknamed him the Little Demon of the Count's House. Returning to the present, Paik was imagining the worst-case scenarios, believing he would cut off her hands or legs. But Kai asked her to give him her hand. Despite her intense fear, she extended her trembling hand to him, begging him for mercy as she imagined he would cut it off. Kai surprised her when he healed the wounds on her hands, then told her that this was just first aid, and she should treat the wound properly to avoid leaving a scar. Kai's surprises didn't stop there. He pointed out some threads and dust on her clothes, and advised her to keep herself clean. When another maid saw what happened, she rushed over to Paik to check on her, while the latter fled in shock. Kai watched her, thinking that she reminded him of Joseph because of her age and clumsy nature. Later, the maids were talking about the sudden change in young Master Seian's personality, noting that he had become gentle recently, and they wondered if he had seen the gates of hell and decided to repent. The maids continue their conversation, with one of them sarcastically remarking that given Seian's demonic temper, it's likely that hell itself couldn't stand him and kicked him out. Paik, the maid Kai had helped, rushes to his defense enthusiastically, insisting that the young master is not demonic at all, but an angel. She tells them how even when she stumbles, he takes care of her and tidies up her appearance and sometimes even gives her delicious food. She insists that he is a kind and wonderful person and that the old rumors about him were completely distorted. Although the other maids didn't believe everything she said, they agreed that Seian had indeed become much kinder. Otherwise, Paik wouldn't have remained in his service after all her mistakes. Kai was listening to their conversation from a distance, which confirmed to him that his former personality, Seian, was indeed evil. He decided to change his location to avoid being seen by anyone, or it would be a problem. Afterwards, he wandered through the beautiful and well-maintained mansion garden, admiring the intricate sculptures and the meticulous care of the garden. He found some wood for carving in a sunny spot, and sat in the warm and pleasant place to begin carving a piece of wood, recalling the memory of Joseph and her love for the spring season. Suddenly, an old gardener appeared and apologized for forgetting to clean the area, but he froze in place when he saw the statue Kai had just finished, which was a perfect replica of Joseph. The gardener was mesmerized by the precision and beauty of the statue, wondering about the identity of the skilled sculptor who made it. Kai looked at the statue and vowed to himself that he would never forget Joseph in this new life, however long or short, thus fulfilling his final promise to her. That evening, Count Shuritan was in his office, surprised by the large number of nobles who had confirmed their attendance at the small social gathering he was organizing. His aide explained that the reason was a rumor that the former Duke Farhan would be attending the party, which astonished and shocked the Count. Later, Lucian informed his brother Kai that guests would be coming to the mansion. He explained that it was just a small social gathering for some nobles with their children, and that their father wanted him to at least greet them. Uncharacteristically, Kai agreed to attend, which surprised Lucian, who commented that Seian never liked such gatherings. Kai replied that he would attend this time to decide what to do in the future, so Lucian advised him to take it easy since he had just recovered. Before Lucian left, he placed a hand on Kai's shoulder, expressing his genuine concern, which made Kai feel a strange, unfamiliar sensation, the feeling of family warmth. A few days later, the party was held, and the turnout was unexpectedly large. Count Shuritan welcomed Count Iklo, who commented on the size of the crowd. Count Iklo confirmed that the reason for this huge turnout was the news of the attendance of the former Duke Farhan, who is personally supported by the Emperor. Count Iklo explained that the reason for this large crowd was that the Emperor had entrusted the former Duke Farhan with the task of choosing the crown princess, which prompted every noble with a daughter to eagerly seek to attend the party. He added that even nobles without daughters were keen to attend, desperate for a chance to catch the attention of the powerful and influential Duke Farhan. Count Shuritan commented that he hadn't realized the kingdom had so many young ladies, and that everyone was brimming with anticipation. In the midst of the party, Lucian, the eldest son of Count Shuritan, arrives and exchanges friendly greetings with Count Iklo, who praises Lucian's talents in studies and swordsmanship and expresses regret for not having a daughter to marry him to. After that, another guest steps forward to greet Count Shuritan, Viscount Chikan. Viscount Chikan is known for having been just a merchant 10 years ago, then using his immense wealth to buy a noble title. Since then, he has expanded his influence and eliminated everyone who stood in his way, making him a person disliked by Count Shuritan, who sees him as an example of the danger of money. The Viscount introduces his son, Horus, to Lucian, then asks Count Shuritan with a sarcastic tone why he doesn't see his second son, Seian, at the party. The Count realized that the Viscount knew about Seian's incident and was using it to annoy him, so Lucian replied that Seian would be coming soon, while thinking to himself, wondering why he was late. Meanwhile, Kai, in Seian's body, was completely lost within the mansion's premises. He had almost forgotten a strange trait that had long been a part of him. He was terrible with directions. After circling the mansion 10 times without finding the ballroom and without spotting a single servant to guide him, he decided to give up, thinking his absence wouldn't be the end of the world. Kai sat on the outer stairs and watched the sunset, a sight that Joseph used to love, and insisted on watching with him every evening. He looked at the sky and remembered his promise to her that he would always remember her just by looking at the sky. At that moment, an elderly man approached him and asked what he was doing alone in this place. Kai replied sharply, wondering if the man was old because he was asking a question he already knew the answer to, as it was obvious he was watching the sunset. The man was impressed by Kai's wit and sharp tongue, and admitted he had approached out of curiosity because Kai's gaze at the sunset seemed incredibly deep, deeper than that of an old man who had lived for decades, which was strange for a young man in his mid-teens. The man rephrased his question, inquiring why a young man was sitting alone in sorrow, to which Kai answered frankly, "I got lost." The man assumed Kai was one of the guests, but Kai denied it, and shocked the man when he revealed his identity, saying, "I live here. I am the second son." The old man was surprised that Kai, Count Shuritan's son, had lost his way in his own house. Kai replied nonchalantly, saying there was no law preventing it. The man smiled and accepted his strange logic, then offered to guide him to the banquet hall, admitting he knew the way better than him, so Kai thanked him and followed. As they walked, the man asked Kai his name, and he replied, "Seian." The man then introduced himself as Fitz Farhan, a name that made Kai wonder with annoyance if he had to remember it. Duke Fitz noticed Kai's annoyance and called him rude, but added that his rudeness was somewhat refreshing, and insisted that he remember his name because he wouldn't regret knowing him. Meanwhile, in the banquet hall, Count Shuritan was worried because Lord Fitz had wandered off somewhere alone. Lucian offered to go look for him, especially since Seian hadn't arrived yet. But before he could leave, his father pointed out that he saw them over there, as Seian was entering the hall. Kai felt he had gotten involved in something troublesome. The Count was shocked and asked his son how he got here with Lord Fitz. Kai coolly blamed the Duke, saying all this commotion happened because of his loud voice. The Count welcomed Lord Fitz, who apologized for being late. The Count said that many were eagerly awaiting him. The Duke explained that he was late because he was guiding a small, lost puppy. Kai realized the Duke meant him and protested, saying that the Duke was already late for the meeting when he found him, so he couldn't use him as an excuse. This response angered the Count, who scolded his son for speaking rudely to Lord Fitz, and offered his deepest apologies to the Duke, admitting he had failed to raise his son well. But the Duke laughed and said he wasn't bothered at all. In fact, he was enjoying himself for the first time in a while thanks to this boy who made his way to the hall not boring. This response left the Count and Lucian bewildered. Lucian stepped forward and formally introduced himself to Duke Fitz, who began to observe the two brothers. The Duke recalled the famous rumors about the Count's sons. One was talented, and the other was a little demon who only brought trouble, but he found that the troublemaker he met today was nothing like the rumors. The Duke realized that although he couldn't judge a person from a brief encounter, his long experience allowed him to read men's characters through their words, actions, and the look in their eyes. He concluded that this boy, Seian, possessed an immense and unusual power, so much so that he himself could not measure it. The Duke turned to his friend, the Count, and praised him, saying he had raised his son exceptionally well. The Count was surprised by this praise. He was used to hearing praise for Lucian, but praise for Seian was a rare thing. After that, the Duke asked the Count to give him some time to discuss a matter in private. As Duke Fitz was about to speak with the Count, Viscount Chikan interrupted him, trying to introduce himself. The Duke coldly ignored him, saying he had never heard that name before and doubted any noble family carried it. This disregard angered the Viscount, who pointed out that the Duke might be out of touch with current affairs due to his distance from politics. The Duke agreed, adding sarcastically that the older he got, the less he wanted to be involved in politics because of the abundance of arrogant fools, in a clear reference to the Viscount. At this insult, Horace, the Viscount's son, stepped in and accused the Duke of being rude, which the Duke questioned, and Horace confirmed. The Duke became furious at the audacity of a Viscount's son rebuking him, and at that moment, he released a small fraction of his aura as a swordmaster, causing everyone in the hall to freeze in place with fear. Lucian, despite his years of training, felt an immense pressure that he could barely withstand, and realized he was a swordmaster, and that he had to intervene before someone collapsed. But before Lucian could move, Kai, in Seian's body, stepped in front of him. Kai didn't come to fight the Duke, but calmly pointed out that there was some grass and hair on his clothes, advising him that if he wanted to scold others on etiquette, he should look presentable first. He then began to dust off his clothes, wondering sarcastically how the Duke could be so dirty when he was the one who had been sitting on the grass. The Duke replied that excessive perfection isn't good, and that small flaws make people feel at ease, to which Kai retorted, asking if he was confusing filth with friendliness. This situation angered Horace, who called Kai a scoundrel, while the Duke asked Kai if he intended to hit him. Kai replied coolly that he wouldn't mind, but the Duke should wash his hands first. At this scene, the Count was terrified by his son's behavior, while Viscount Chikan forced his son Horace to bow and leave. After they left, the Duke commented that Horace was glaring at Kai with a murderous look, to which Kai sarcastically replied that the Duke's eyesight must be failing. This situation left the Count and Lucian in a state of shock, with the Count remarking that Seian seemed completely different. After that, the Duke regained his seriousness and asked the Count for a quiet place to talk. As they were walking away, Lucian called out to his brother and asked with concern if he was okay after being exposed to the Swordmaster's aura. Kai reassured him that he was fine for now. This simple answer deeply moved Lucian, who felt overjoyed and thought to himself how nice his brother was. and how he had spoken to him normally without hatred or disdain for the first time in a long while. Remembering that his little brother was his most precious possession, the last gift his mother had left him, Lucian reflected on their relationship. He remembered how he had wished they could be close since childhood, but the inferiority complex Seian felt towards him caused his personality to become more twisted over time. As the hatred grew in Seian's eyes whenever he looked at him, Lucian found no choice but to give up on trying to get closer. Lucian was overjoyed that he could now be by his brother's side in a comfortable atmosphere, so much so that he was almost happy that Seian had lost his memory. And when Kai, in Seian's body, announced he was going back to his room, Lucian felt disappointed, thinking his brother was avoiding him again, and that his hopes were just an illusion. But Kai stopped, suddenly grabbed his wrist and apologized, admitting he didn't know the way back and asking him to accompany him just this once. This was the first time his brother had asked him for something, so Lucian was overcome with immense joy and agreed immediately. Meanwhile, in a private room, Duke Fitz revealed to Count Shuritan the real reason for his visit, which was to choose someone to be by the Crown Prince's side. The Count thought he meant choosing the Crown Princess, but the Duke denied it, explaining that he came to look for a friend for the prince, someone who could curb his fiery temper. The Duke explained that Prince Edith, the strong candidate to inherit the throne, possessed all the qualifications, from swordsmanship skills to academic abilities. But his only flaw was his sharp temper and his inability to control his anger, to the point where he might kill anyone who spoke carelessly about him. For this reason, the Duke suggested to the Emperor to place someone beside the prince who could calm his nature, especially since the prince was known for not forming any personal relationships. The Count realized that this was the reason for the Duke's visit. The Duke admitted that he initially thought of Lucian, with his calm and steady personality, to be a companion for the prince, but he soon realized he was mistaken, as he feared that Lucian's ice-cold personality might provoke the prince's fiery anger instead of calming it, and one of them might get hurt as a result of this clash. The Count agreed with the Duke's opinion, as everyone knew that Lucian would not back down from his principles even with a sword at his neck, which made the Count agree with the Duke that this pairing would be dangerous. Therefore, the Duke told the Count that he had chosen someone else, who was also his son. The Count realized with horror that the Duke meant 100. The Duke confirmed that he wanted Seian to take on this task, which the Count flatly refused. The Count justified his refusal by stating that Seian was completely unstable and full of flaws, and any mistake from him could endanger the entire family. In a desperate attempt to persuade the Duke, the Count revealed a dangerous secret, that Seian had recently been in an accident and lost his memory, which greatly shocked the Duke. Count Shuritan refused Duke Fitz's request, apologizing that his son Seian had amnesia and was unqualified for such a task. But this confession did not deter the Duke. In fact, it increased his admiration for Seian. He found it unnatural for a boy with amnesia to be so calm and composed, instead of being scared and agitated. Seian's eyes were calm and deep, which made the Duke certain that his judgment in assessing men had not failed him yet, and that this boy was a true gem. The Duke told the Count that he saw no problem with the memory loss. In fact, he felt he had made an excellent choice. He asked him to think about it, admitting that he had taken a liking to the boy. Later, the Count met with his two sons, Lucian and Kai, and explained to them that the Duke had come to find a suitable friend for Prince Edith. Kai scoffed to himself at the idea of a prince needing someone to find a friend for him, while Lucian asked his father why he was telling him this. The Count revealed that the Duke wanted Seian to take on this task. Kai and Lucian were both shocked. Kai thought the Duke had gone senile, while Lucian flatly refused the idea. The Count tried to persuade Lucian that this was for the family's benefit, but Lucian protested, refusing, and reminding him that Prince Edith was known for his fiery temper and intolerance for the slightest mistakes, and he questioned how a boy with amnesia could be sent to such a person. The Count admitted he was hesitant at first but changed his mind after thinking it over, believing that the Duke must have his reasons for choosing Seian. Lucian offered to go in his brother's place, but his father refused. In the midst of their argument, Kai suddenly interrupted them, announcing his agreement to go. His father was shocked and asked if he was serious. Kai justified his decision by saying the task didn't seem difficult, as it only required visiting the prince from time to time to talk with him. Lucian and his father tried to warn him of the danger and that any mistake could cost him his life, but Kai insisted on his position. He said that since he had been a nuisance to the family and nicknamed the Little Demon, this might be a good opportunity to do something useful. He then left the room, leaving his father to ponder his words and think that his son might have truly changed. A few days later, Kai arrived at the Imperial Palace. He was amazed by the sheer size of the place. And then he spotted Prince Edith, who was practicing his swordsmanship. He decided not to interrupt him and sat down to wait nearby, but he soon dozed off under the warm sun. He woke up to the prince's voice, who was boldly commenting on his courage for sleeping in the prince's training grounds. Kai asked him who he was, and then tried to leave, but the prince stopped him. The prince asked Kai if he needed a friend, to which Kai replied that he would leave and tell everyone the prince had kicked him out and didn't need a friend like him. This response angered the prince. who drew his sword and placed it on Kai's neck, warning him that he would kill him if he turned his back on him again without permission. Kai was unfazed by the threat. Instead, he calmly asked the prince to let go of his arm, as he did not wish to touch a sweaty hand. The prince asked if he dared to give him orders, to which Kai replied that it was just a request, not an order. The prince was surprised by Kai's lack of fear of death and asked him again who he was. Kai introduced himself as Seian Shuritan. The prince recalled that the Shuritan family was known for its integrity and good reputation. He asked why Kai was there, and was told that an old man had sent him. The prince immediately understood he meant Duke Fitz. Kai then bluntly told the prince that the Duke had asked him to be his friend, but added that it didn't seem like the prince needed a friend, so he would leave. The prince stopped him again, reminding him of his previous threat. Kai calmly asked if he was planning to kill him. The prince noticed that Kai treated the idea of death with levity. The prince decided he didn't need a friend, but it was improper to send back someone Duke Fitz had sent, so he told Kai to follow him. The prince took Kai to the library. Kai showed no objection to the books, and even considered the place comfortable since he wasn't on an official visit anyway. The prince was surprised when Kai sat far away from him and started reading a book. He was actually observing Kai, expecting that he, like other noble sons, would try to flatter him to win his favor, and that this disregard was just a strategy to get his attention. But 3 hours passed, and Kai didn't lift his eyes from his book, as if he had completely forgotten the prince's existence. The prince felt deeply insulted. This was the first time anyone had treated him with such disregard. He decided to see how long Kai could continue to sit in silence, beginning a silent test of wills between them. After some time, the prince put his foot out, causing a servant carrying tea to trip and almost fall. But before he could hit the ground, Kai used a mysterious and invisible power to stop him and restore his balance without anyone noticing. The prince was shocked by what he saw, and didn't know how the servant had suddenly regained his balance. Kai advised the servant, without looking up from his book, to always watch his step. Meanwhile, the prince wondered if Kai was the one who did it, but he quickly dismissed the idea. After drinking his tea, Kai announced that he would be leaving and would return the next day. The prince was surprised by Kai's insistence on coming every day just to spend his time reading, to which Kai replied that he had to be polite to his elders for the time being. As Kai was leaving, the prince wondered in confusion about the truth of this mysterious young man. This routine continued for several days, with Kai coming and sitting to read in silence. One day, the prince asked him if he intended to play with him instead of reading. The prince sighed, having grown accustomed to this strange situation, wondering if Kai truly didn't realize that others longed for just a single moment to meet him. The book the prince was reading caught Kai's attention, and he asked if he knew it. Kai replied that he had read it before and was interested in the art of doll making. The prince commented that Kai was also interested in this art. Kai mentioned that the story of the doll maker in the book was very fascinating, as it was about a man who became an enemy of the whole world to protect one woman. Kai then asked the prince for his opinion on this man, and the prince answered without hesitation that he was insane and a complete fool. Kai looked at the book sadly and agreed with the prince's opinion. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young girl with light green hair who called out to the prince, "Edith, my brother." The prince greeted her warmly, and it turned out she was his only sister, Princess Rini. The princess said she came just because she felt like seeing him, and then she noticed Kai and asked who he was. Kai introduced himself as Seian, son of Count Shuritan. Princess Rini approached Kai, touched his face, and remarked that he was even more beautiful than women. It is narrated that Princess Rini was very much loved by the Emperor and Prince Edith, and thanks to this power supporting her, she was known for acting recklessly and without fear. Although Kai knew nothing about all this, from this brief encounter, he was certain of one thing about her. After meeting Princess Rini, Kai concluded to himself that she was the type of person one gets tired of knowing. He then gave her a slight bow and turned to leave, completely ignoring her. The princess was shocked by this disregard, especially since she had just praised him, and she shouted angrily while calling for her brother, Prince Edith. The prince told her she had to understand, as this was how Seian treated even him. This astonished the princess. Rini explained that when her brother is angry, she can't deal with him either, and what her brother hates most is being ignored. This situation piqued Princess Rini's curiosity. She found it surprising that Seian could ignore her brother the prince and get away with it, and she decided to keep him under her watch. Later, Seian returned to his room in the Shuritan mansion, where he found his brother Lucian with another young man. Lucian welcomed him and introduced his friend, Cliff. Cliff smiled sarcastically, confirming that Seian had indeed lost his memory, and suggested they reintroduce themselves to each other. Seian introduced himself, and Cliff laughed, surprised that the demonic boy was greeting him. Lucian scolded him for his words. Lucian then invited Kai to sit beside him, and began to ask about his day with concern, which made Kai comment that he was like a mother with his excessive worrying. Kai noticed something strange about Cliff, and asked Lucian if he was close to him, to which Lucian replied that they had been friends for a long time. At that point, Kai decided to offer Lucian some advice, explaining that when one clings too much to the dead, their souls find it difficult to leave the world of the living. He added that if they die unjustly, their souls remained stuck beside those they trusted in life, as if pleading for their grievances to be resolved. Cliff was shocked and asked Kai what he was suddenly talking about, and if he meant that child. Kai replied that he didn't know which child was meant, but he was sure that someone close to Cliff had died a very unjust death. In that moment, Kai felt the cold, emotionless gaze of a grim reaper. Cliff asked Kai in a panic how he knew about that person's death, and if he had investigated him, which was strange for someone who didn't even remember his own name. Cliff rephrased his question, "How did you know there was a dead person near me?" Kai realized he had gotten involved in something and quickly made up an excuse, saying that since his near-death experience in the recent accident, he had become able to see the souls of the dead. Lucian showed his concern for Kai. Kai explained that when he first saw Cliff, he saw a soul stuck around him. Cliff asked him in shock if he had seen Justin's form. Kai denied it, explaining that he only sees a mass of light, a dead soul, and doesn't know if it's a boy or a girl. He then added a terrifying truth, which was that he could also see the Grim Reaper waiting to take that soul. Cliff refused to believe Kai's ridiculous story, to which Kai coolly replied that it was up to him whether to believe it or not. But he added one last piece of information, explaining that a soul that refuses to follow a Grim Reaper is destined to fade away after a certain period. Therefore, the best solution for a soul that died unjustly and is clinging to the world is to resolve its lingering regret so it can depart peacefully. At this point, a concerned Lucian asked his friend Cliff what was happening, reminding him that Justin was his little cousin. Cliff confirmed this and began to tell the story. A few months ago, his uncle, Count Devlin, suddenly collapsed due to chest pains and his health did not recover easily. As a result, his eldest son, Justin, was chosen as the heir to the title. But a month ago, Justin suddenly disappeared. The family thought he had run away out of fear of shouldering the responsibility of the title, especially after a letter from him was found in which he confessed his lack of confidence in his ability to lead the family. As a result of his disappearance, Pellison, their cousin from their uncle's second marriage, became the center of attention and support. But Cliff believed that the Justin he knew was not weak enough to abandon his duties and run away, and he was certain he would return. But now, after hearing Kai's words, he was terrified by the thought that his cousin might be dead. Kai commented that the story seemed clear from his perspective. Cliff asked if he suspected his aunt, his uncle's wife, and Kai pointed out that the scenario was common, a half-brother, and the eldest son who has the right of succession. Cliff passionately defended his aunt, saying that Aunt Ija was not that type of person, and that she always treated Justin like her own son, so much so that Justin would boast about her every time they met. After hearing the story, Kai decided to himself to stay out of it, as he didn't want to interfere in the details of a soul that had nothing to do with him. But he felt annoyed seeing that sad, lingering soul, wondering if his sense of responsibility as a former Grim Reaper was still inside him. Kai sighed and told Cliff that in his opinion, the answer was already clear, but he offered to conduct a test. That would require a little help from Count Devlin. The scene shifts to show Aunt Ija sneaking quietly at night, until she reaches her destination. The scene shifts to Shanos meeting Aunt Ija in a secret place. The aunt asks him if the piece is not ready yet, and he replies that it is now ready. He welcomed her and took her to a dark room, where he revealed the piece she had requested from him. It was a doll identical to her son, Justin. The mother was moved as she saw the doll call her mom, and she told Kai it was perfect. Kai told her he was glad she was satisfied and that the payment would be later, as he would come to collect it himself. The lady agreed, then called the doll, Justin, to come to her side. After Shanos delivered the doll to Lady Aja, he reminded her of their promise, the payment, and left. Kai appeared behind him, and Kai thanked him for his help. Shanos cheerfully replied that he was ready to help any time because it was fun, but Kai coolly commented that Shanos seemed to have too much free time. Kai pointed out that Shanos, who had ignored his repeated calls, appeared immediately when he promised to stop being angry in exchange for his help with this task. Shanos praised Kai's amazing doll-making skills, to which Kai explained that the credit went to Shanos himself for not erasing his memories before he entered this body. Shanos reminded him that Kai was the one who asked him not to erase his memories. Shanos asked if he regretted it and offered to erase them for him now, but Kai refused, saying that remembering what happened for the rest of his life was the punishment he imposed on himself for being a pathetic fool. Shanos mocked him, saying he held a grudge, to which Kai replied that he chose annihilation to stop doing such pathetic things, and wondered who insisted on bringing him back to life. And when Shanos jokingly threatened to show him the meaning of a real grudge, he suddenly changed the subject and commented on how beautiful the weather was, even though it was raining, which made Kai think he should have cut ties with him completely. Meanwhile, at the Devlin mansion, the servants and Lady Ija gave the returning Justin, the doll, an extremely warm and emotional welcome, as his aunt hugged him tightly and asked where he had been all this time. The aunt expressed her gratitude for his return, and the servants praised Lady Ija for being a good mother, who loves Justin very much even though he is not her biological son. In another room, Aunt Aja was thinking evilly about the Count's will, vowing that she would not give up. Back at the Imperial Palace, Princess Rini was asking her brother, Prince Edith, if Seian had come today as well. The prince jokingly asked if she missed him, and she got angry and vehemently denied it. The prince noticed that his sister, who always acts formally in front of others, returns to her normal girlish self in Seian's presence. Rini then accused her brother of being the one waiting for Seian, because he wasn't used to visiting the library daily. The prince denied it, but admitted he was curious to know why someone who used to come every day had suddenly stopped coming. Rini then asked him if he had heard the news. She revealed to him that Seian had lost his memory. The prince was shocked by this news, so Rini explained that she did some investigating after Seian acted arrogantly towards her, and discovered he had recently been in an accident and lost his memory, and that the news was confirmed by the servants of the Shuritan mansion. The prince was bewildered, wondering how someone with amnesia could be so calm and composed. He asked his sister for details about the accident, and she replied with a smile, asking if he was curious. Princess Rini continued to tease her brother, Prince Edith, telling him that if he was curious about Seian's accident, he should investigate it himself, and that she wouldn't tell him easily as punishment for teasing her. Then she left him, in a state of anger and frustration. Meanwhile, at the Shuritan mansion, Cliff rushed to Kai, and excitedly told him that Justin had indeed returned, just as he said. Cliff was in disbelief, wondering how this could happen, but Kai, who was reading a book, calmly reminded him that he had asked him not to ask any questions. Cliff remained confused, wondering if the returnee was truly Justin. Cliff couldn't contain himself and grabbed Kai, demanding answers. But Lucian intervened and asked his friend to stop because he was bothering Seian. Kai repeated his warning that he would not allow any questions on this matter. After that, Cliff explained the plan that Kai had devised. Kai had suggested they ask Count Devlin to write a will with a specific content, that all family assets would go to Justin, but if he did not appear, they would all revert to the state. Initially, the Count refused to write such a will, but Cliff convinced him it was just a way to find Justin. Kai's prediction was that if the ant was the culprit, Justin would return, but he would be someone else in his form. Lucian admitted that when he saw Justin actually return, he was confused and didn't know how to accept the situation. Cliff continued to struggle to understand the situation. Kai told him not to think about it too much, but to focus on the final result. He explained that their goal was to find out why the soul stuck around Cliff had died, who had killed it, and to ensure it was peacefully guided to the Grim Reaper. Cliff thought about the goal, and was convinced that what mattered now was not the identity of Justin's look-alike, but finding Justin's real killer. Before Cliff left, Kai warned him again not to touch his body with unwashed hands, or he would regret it. Cliff laughed nervously, thinking about how Seian's personality had changed. He no longer looked at them with a hateful gaze but had become detestable in a different way. The scene shifts to Aunt Ija contemplating the Justin doll, admiring its precision and ability to move. She recalls how she felt lost after the will was announced, believing all her plans had collapsed, until someone came to her in secret. This person was the doll maker, Shanos, who told her he could make a living doll identical to the image she desired. And although she thought it was ridiculous, she accepted his offer because she had no other choice. She was surprised that the result was so satisfactory, a doll indistinguishable from a living human. And while no one is watching, the doll calls Lady Ija Mom. The lady grabs his chin harshly and tells him in a cold tone not to call her by that name when they are alone, because it disgusts her, thus revealing her true face as a murderer. Lady Ija continued her cold conversation with the doll that resembled her stepson, Justin. Despite her annoyance at his identical voice, which startled her every time, she once again ordered him not to call her Mom, but the doll, as if possessed by Justin's real soul, began to ask her with tears streaming down its face, "Why did you do that to me, Mom?" Lady Ija was shocked and wondered how a doll could shed tears. When Justin tried to touch her, she moved away from him in horror and screamed at him not to touch her, then fled the room in a panic, determined to go to the man who made the doll. She arrived at Shanos' secret workshop. Lady Ija frantically told him that something was wrong with the piece, as it was shedding tears and looking at her with hateful eyes. Shanos calmly replied that such things happen sometimes, and explained to her that souls who don't realize they have died can sometimes inhabit a doll that resembles them. The lady was horrified, realizing that Justin's soul had indeed returned to haunt her. Shanos told her there was a way to hide that soul, which was to find the body. He explained that she must make the soul realize that the doll is not its real body, and that it has, in fact, died. The only way to achieve this is to find Justin's original corpse and burn it. Aja became tense when she learned that this would force her to exhume Justin's body. Following Shanos' instructions, Lady Aja sent her men to search for the body. After finding it, she ordered them to hurry and show her the body, insisting they had no time to waste. Her men were surprised because the corpse had not decomposed at all, and looked as if Justin were still alive. Even stranger, they noticed that the stones tied to the body were different. Whereas they had tied several small stones, they now found a single large one. But Lady Aja, who had no time for these strange details, ordered them to hurry up and burn the body. As they were about to commit their crime, Kai suddenly appeared. He addressed them, saying that after committing the great sin, murder, they were now trying to commit the sin of concealing a body. Kai asked them if knowing his identity would change anything. Lady Aja ordered her men to deal with him, but before they could harm him, Lucian intervened with his sword and saved him. warning them that any further step towards his brother would mean their death. Then Cliff appeared, sarcastically adding that they would all die anyway. Lady Ija was shocked to see her nephew Cliff and asked him how he got here. Cliff told her he could no longer call her auntie, expressing his disgust that she could kill Justin, who was loyal and loving to her. Cliff demanded to know why she committed this heinous crime. Lady Ija broke down and screamed, confessing that she did it because she hated him so much. She explained that she hated the way her husband, Count Devlin, showered only Justin with warmth and love, while ignoring her son, Pelison. This resentment made her wish for death, and she hated Justin for monopolizing his father's love to the point she wanted to kill him. She claimed she couldn't bear to see her son grow up deprived of his father's love, and if she couldn't give him that love, she at least wanted to give him the wealth and status of the Count. She insisted she did it all for her son. Cliff confronted her with the truth of her motives, explaining that Count Devlin treated Justin kindly because he felt sorry for him for losing his mother at a young age. He coldly told her that people don't usually commit murder out of jealousy for affection their children didn't receive, and that ultimately she killed Justin to satisfy her own greed and avarice. When Cliff tried to grab her to bring her to justice, Kai stopped him and asked him to wait a moment, then called for someone to come out of the darkness. Everyone was surprised by the appearance of Pelison, Lady Ija's son. His mother asked him in shock what he was doing there, and the shocking confession came from Pelison himself, as he said that he was the one who killed Justin. Pelison explained that his mother was not the killer, and that he was the one who killed his brother. His mother thought he was trying to cover for her, but he insisted that he came out because he could no longer hide his sin. He began to recount what happened on that fateful night. He had seen his mother go out late at night, felt suspicious, and secretly followed her. There, he witnessed his mother and her men throwing his brother into the lake. But after his mother left, Justin crawled out of the lake, having managed to cut the ropes with a knife he found at the bottom. When Justin saw his brother Pelison, he asked him for help. But at that moment, a terrifying thought occurred to Pelison. If his brother returned alive, it would be over for his mother. And of course, his own future would be over too. In that moment of fear and hesitation without realizing it, he snatched the knife from his brother's hand and stabbed him to death, then tied the stone to his body again and sank him in the lake. Pelison collapsed, screaming his confession, "I'm the one who killed him." After Pelison's confession, his mother, Lady Ija, tried to protect him, insisting that she was the murderer, while he continued to confess his guilt to clear her. But suddenly, Lady Ija's despair turned into a bloody decision. She decided that it didn't matter who the killer was, as long as she could get rid of everyone there, it would be as if nothing had happened. She called for her hidden men to come out and eliminate everyone, but the ones who appeared were not her men, but Prince Edith and his soldiers. Lady Ija was shocked, and the prince declared that both murder and attempted murder are serious crimes, and he ordered his men to arrest them. Lady Ija and Pelison were led away screaming, while Lucian watched their miserable end without any feeling of sympathy. After that, Kai asked the prince why he was there, and the prince replied nonchalantly that he was just passing by and saw what was happening. Meanwhile, Cliff was still bewildered as he looked at Justin, the doll, and he asked Kai if Justin's soul was truly not inside the doll, which Kai confirmed. Kai revealed the truth. Everything Shanos told the Countess was a lie. From the beginning, Kai designed the doll only to cry, and the whole plan was just a trick, to use the frightened Countess to find Justin's body. At that moment, Justin appeared before Cliff. Cliff said sadly that he was now sure it was just a doll, as the real Justin always smiled at him, but now he wasn't smiling. Cliff apologized to Justin, saying that if he had been wiser, he might have noticed the conflict within the family and prevented his death. Justin hugged Cliff and thanked him. Cliff was very moved after hearing his voice for the last time, after Justin's soul risked annihilation to inhabit the doll for a few moments, just to thank Cliff. It then ascended peacefully to the sky. Kai felt relieved that Justin had finally found peace. Later, Lady Ija and Pelison were sentenced to death. While Lady Ija was on the execution platform, Shanos suddenly appeared before her. He told her he had come to collect the price for the peace he had made for her. In her final moments, Lady Ija realized that everything about this maker was strange, and that the idea of making a living doll was a supernatural matter. She screamed that she had lost everything and there was nothing he could take from her. But Shanos revealed the true price, the soul. He explained to her that most who commit evil and die do not follow the god of death easily, and for that reason they are taken by force under the guise of payment, leaving her in absolute terror, as she heard his final words about the god of death. After Shanos successfully captured Lady Ija's soul, he decided to leave. Later, Kai went to the imperial palace to thank Prince Edith for his help in Justin's case. The prince received him arrogantly, commenting on the long time it took him to come, and then directly asked him about the truth of that thing he saw on the day of the incident. After the prince ordered him to answer, Kai explained that the Justin who had returned was just a doll, The prince was surprised how a doll could move on its own, so Kai explained that it was made using the doll magic mentioned in the book he saw him reading. When the prince asked him about the location of the doll maker, Kai feigned ignorance, saying he was someone who doesn't stay in one place and that he wasn't close to him. The prince expressed his regret over that, noting that people generally don't have a good opinion of doll magicians, but he sees things differently. He mentioned an old story about a single doll magician who managed to annihilate an entire army, and how these stories sparked his interest in their power and his desire to recruit such a magician if one were nearby. Kai changed the subject and asked the prince how he arrived at the crime scene that day. The prince became flustered, as the truth was that he was heading to the Shuritan mansion to see Kai, saw them leaving, and secretly followed them, but his pride prevented him from admitting it. So he stuck to his first story and insisted it was just a coincidence. Kai gave him a pitying look, realizing he was lying, and commented that he was better at reading people's expressions than he expected. The prince started to feel foolish whenever he spoke with Kai. The prince was bewildered, not understanding why Kai chose to do that, despite his nature and personality. The prince then returned to asking Kai about his memory loss. He asked if he remembered nothing about the incident he caused, and when Kai confirmed, the prince asked if he wasn't curious to know what happened. Before he could tell him, Kai interrupted, saying he didn't want to hear it from him. But at that moment, Princess Rini appeared and offered to tell him the truth about the incident herself. Kai realized there was no escape from hearing the story, so the princess told him the shocking truth. It is said that he jumped from a building of his own free will. Kai was shocked by this revelation. Later, the princess was complaining to her brother about Seian's indifferent reaction to the news of his suicide attempt, and how she had put so much effort into investigating in the hope of breaking his composure. The prince told her that her actions were like those of children, who annoy the person whose attention they want to attract. The princess got angry and denied it, but she pointed out that he too pays a lot of attention to Seian. At that, the prince admitted to himself, hating to do so, that he was very interested in that mysterious young man. Prince Edith and Princess Rini continued their conversation about Seian. The prince admitted that there was something that worried him about Seian, explaining that he doesn't seem like the type to attempt suicide. Even if someone loses their memory, their basic nature doesn't change. He added that Seian seems like the type to face his problems and solve them, not run away from them by ending his life, which Rini agreed with. The prince also remembered the angry expression on Seian's face on the day of the incident at the Devlin Mansion, and wondered about the reason for that anger. Meanwhile, Kai was thinking about his predicament, angry at Shanos for putting him in the body of a person full of problems. Although he had decided to ignore the matter of the original Seian's suicide attempt, he began to worry that the reason that drove Seian to despair might still exist and could affect him as well. Therefore, he decided to at least understand the circumstances surrounding the incident. Kai went to his father, Count Shuritan, and asked him directly why he jumped. The Count was surprised that his son knew about it, but Kai coolly replied that what mattered was knowing the reason, not how he found out. Kai said he had a rough guess that he was a person full of resentment towards the world. Kai asked him another question. Where did he wake up after the incident? Was it in this house? The Count answered no, revealing that the place where the incident occurred was Goethe Academy. Kai began to analyze the new information. He initially thought that Seian's feeling of inferiority and resentment towards his brother Lucian was the reason for his suicide attempt. But the incident happening at the academy and not at home suggested there was another reason. As he was walking in the garden thinking, he heard the sound of carving, and found the old gardener he had met before. Kai noticed that the gardener looked tired, and soon the man staggered and almost fell from exhaustion. Kai rushed to help him, and the gardener was surprised to see young Master Seian. Kai advised him to rest in the shade because working under the hot sun had affected him. When Kai disappeared for a moment, the gardener wondered where he had gone. Then Kai returned with a basin of water. Kai explained the importance of drinking water in the summer, and the gardener thanked him, who could never have imagined that a day would come when he would drink water brought to him by the young master himself. When Kai suggested that the gardener take the rest of the day off, the man hesitated, saying that the lady was about to return. بالتأكيد إليك ترجمة الجزء الجديد من القصة. Kai began to wonder about the identity of the lady the gardener had mentioned, concluding that she must be the lady of the Shuritan mansion, whom he had not seen even once. The gardener explained to him that the lady takes great interest in the garden and always wants to see it looking different and new, which is why a new garden must be completed before her return, leaving him no time to rest during this season. The gardener then hurried to assure him that he meant no offense, and that the lady was a refined person and the problem lay in his own shortcomings. Kai thought to himself that gardens change naturally with the seasons, and that the desire for only artificial and showy changes was a strange taste. He concluded that although he had not met her, he could guess her personality type from this method of tormenting her subordinates. At that moment, Kai heard the maid urgently calling for him. The maid, Pike, arrived panting, and eagerly told Kai that he must hurry back, because the lady had returned. Indeed, the lady, a countess with long dark blue hair, had arrived and was greeted by her eldest son, Lucian. She exchanged superficial words of praise with him, saying he looked healthy thanks to his excellence, and began, in an indirectly joking manner, to hint and wonder who was the reason her eldest son had such qualities. She answered herself that he must have inherited this excellence from her because she was his mother, which made Lucian feel uncomfortable as he always did with her. The Countess then turned to talk about Seian, feigning concern after hearing about his accident. When Kai arrived, he saw them together. She ran towards Kai and grabbed his hands, expressing her extreme worry for him and that she wished she could have been by his side during his illness. Kai noticed how her facial expressions changed in the blink of an eye. The Countess scolded Kai for not greeting her and asked if he had forgotten her as well due to his amnesia. She then began to blame him for choosing to jump from the building and worrying everyone, and for thinking of throwing away the life she had given him. Lucian tried to stop her, but she ignored him and continued her psychological attack, revealing to Kai that his real mother had died while giving birth to him. Kai was shocked by this information. While Lucian desperately tried to convince him not to listen, the Countess feigned surprise, asking if he had forgotten this too, then harshly berated him for forgetting his mother who suffered to give birth to him and died because of him. Lucian realized this was her constant method of torture. Her seemingly kind words were always filled with poisonous thorns that had cornered and tormented Seian his entire life. The Countess continued her attack, saying she now understood why he chose to die, and that since he had killed his mother, he must live even harder to compensate for her life as well. Lucian grabbed his arm, begging him not to be deceived by his stepmother's words, and assuring him that the current Seian was different. At that moment, Kai understood everything. He finally understood the reason for the original Seian's miserable life. Lucian was not the problem, but there was a woman by his side, digging at his wounds and constantly reminding him of them. Very calmly, Kai confronted his stepmother, assuring her that his biological mother's death was not his fault at all. The Countess was shocked by his response, so Kai continued, explaining that death is a fate determined by the god of death, and it is not something humans can be blamed for, and that he is fully aware his mother did not die because of him, so there was no need to repeat this lie. The Countess became enraged, as she was not used to Seian talking back to her this way. Previously, he would be in pain and run away crying whenever she confronted him with these words. She changed her tactic, feigning happiness and saying that his deceased mother would be happy that he thinks this way and would not regret dying for him. Kai agreed with her, then asked her an awkward question. If she had to choose between her life and her son's life, would she choose herself? She became flustered and answered that of course she would choose her son, to which Kai replied that his real mother would have done the same. The Countess realized that Seian was no longer the fragile boy she knew, and that his memory loss had completely changed his personality. At that moment, Lucian burst out laughing with sheer joy. When his mother asked him why he was laughing, he apologized, saying that what Seian said was something he had wished to hear from him for a long time, and that he laughed out of extreme happiness. This further angered the Countess, who scolded Lucian for his response, and accused the two brothers of ganging up to mock her, and threatened to tell their father. Faced with this situation, and after her reputation had been shaken in front of the servants who were watching the scene, the Countess announced she was tired and would withdraw to her room, but she vowed to herself to get revenge on Seian. After she left, Kai commented that he hadn't said anything funny, but Lucian assured him that he was happy, and that it was the happiest day of his life. Later, in a meeting with his father, and Kai announced his decision to return to Gotha Academy. His father was shocked and asked why he wanted to go back there, to which Kai replied that he should at least get his graduation certificate. Lucian begged him to stay, but Kai insisted, saying he had matters to investigate there as well. The Count agreed to his decision, considering it the first time his son had made a decision for himself, and that he now had the strength to decide his own affairs. When he asked him about the departure date, Kai replied that he would leave the next day, which further shocked Lucian. After Kai made up his mind, he reassured his brother Lucian, who understood his decision, and asked him to stop overreacting. The next morning, Lucian found that his brother had already left, leaving behind a short note that read, "I'll be back, don't worry." Meanwhile, the old gardener, Beeson, was heading to the garden to work, ignoring the doctor's advice to rest, because the Countess had returned and the work needed to be finished quickly. But upon arriving, he was stunned to find that the huge statue he had been working on had been completely and masterfully finished overnight. He immediately realized that this was the same masterful carving skill that he had seen in the small statue of the girl, Joseph, and he wondered about the identity of this mysterious genius sculptor. On his way, Kai realized he didn't know the way to Gotha Academy at all, and that he couldn't go back to the mansion and ask for a guard after the scene he had caused upon his departure. He decided to focus on getting out of the capital first, so he asked a passerby for the way to the outer gates. The man gave him simple directions, but after an hour of walking, Kai felt that something was wrong, so he asked the same man again, who repeated the same directions. Kai thanked him for his help, then started moving again. After walking for another long time to no avail, he stopped to ask another person, only to find it was the same blue-haired man for the third time. Kai finally realized he had been walking in circles. The young man sarcastically commented that he had never seen someone struggle so much to find the outer gates, and that this was the 6th time they had met. The young man took pity on Kai and decided to take him there himself, only for Kai to discover that the gate had been very close the whole time. When the young man learned that Kai's destination was Gotha Academy, He was surprised how someone with such a poor sense of direction could get there. And indeed, as soon as he said goodbye, Kai once again went the wrong way, prompting the young man to stop him. The young man sighed and said he had no other choice, and since he was heading the same way, he would accompany him to the academy. This excessive kindness aroused Kai's suspicion, and he told him that he was not the type to accept excessive generosity without a reason. The blue-haired young man stopped Kai again as he was heading the wrong way, grabbed the reins of his horse, and told him that he would accompany him since they were going in the same direction. Although Kai understood that the young man was trying to guide him without admitting it, he decided to follow him because he was completely lost. They rode together on their horses in complete silence. The young man thought to himself how Kai was treating him as if he didn't exist even though he was guiding him, and that he had a special talent for annoying those who helped him. He wondered why he continued to help him even though he was annoying. He concluded that he was doing it because he seemed so weak and helpless that he feared he might one day find him lost on the other side of the continent if he left him alone, remembering a previous encounter they had in their childhood. Nevertheless, he found Kai's self-confidence and direct attitude to be interesting. When they arrived at an inn, the innkeeper, Tina, welcomed them and asked if they wanted one room. They both quickly asserted that they were not together. And then Kai requested separate rooms, meals, and bathwater. Tina explained that she was getting ready to serve them. After showing the young man and Kai to their rooms, she returned to prepare their food. Troublesome men appeared and started looking for her, causing a commotion. Tina tried to hide from them, because her father had asked her to avoid them destroying the place. The blue-haired young man and Kai appeared behind her, and distracted her by pretending to be hungry. Tina moved to prepare their food, and the troublemakers rejoiced when they saw she had finally appeared. Tina apologized to Kai and the young man for the lack of space in her tavern and asked them to share a table. But one of the troublesome men grabbed her violently. Tina asked him to let her go, but he continued to harass her. Her father tried to defend her, but the assailant pushed him hard and knocked him to the ground. The assailant then grabbed Tina again. While she screamed for help, the blue-haired young man intervened in the brawl, grabbed the assailant's wrist, and calmly asked him to let the girl go so he could eat his food. The assailant thought this young man was wishing for death, and since he was eager for a fight, he decided to grant him his wish. Kai's cold comment that the assailant wouldn't enjoy the fight puzzled the man. The young man grabbed the assailant and told him that he doesn't look for trouble, but he doesn't run from it either. Then he crushed his hand with great force, making the man scream in pain. The assailant's companions were shocked by this unexpected strength. As one of them tried to attack him from behind, the young man skillfully revealed a dagger and cut the attacker's hand, advising him to be grateful it wasn't his right hand. At that moment, the assailant recognized the identity of the blue-haired young man from his fighting style using 2 daggers and his incredible speed. He screamed in terror, asking if he was Jaren of the Black Mercenary Guild. Jaren is known as a legendary figure who rose to the rank of an S-class mercenary using only 2 small daggers. And despite his friendly appearance, he is famous for his cruelty and ruthlessness. The assailant realized he had picked the wrong person to antagonize, and in a desperate attempt, he decided to attack directly. But he suddenly passed by Jaren, and Kai appeared behind him, putting a knife to his neck. Jaren hadn't yet realized that the attacker's only concern was to take a hostage. In a moment of confusion, the attacker managed to grab Kai and use him as a hostage. But Kai, instead of being scared, very calmly asked the kidnapper a strange question. Isn't it customary when taking a hostage to choose a woman or an elderly person? He then wondered why he chose him, and if he looked weaker than that girl. The kidnapper was stunned by this bizarre question, and ordered him to be silent. Kai explained that he was not enjoying this situation at all, and that the thing he hates most in the world is being touched by someone. With a light touch on the kidnapper's arm, Kai used his knowledge of the body's pressure points, causing the man excruciating pain that made him drop his weapon and fall to the ground, writhing. Jaren himself was shocked that a simple press could cause so much pain. Kai explained that the human body has weak points that can be fatal with a light touch, and advised the collapsed kidnapper to choose his hostages more carefully next time. Tina was amazed at how a handsome-looking person could overcome a huge mercenary in an instant. Jaren then turned to the rest of the assailants and asked them if they wanted more. After Kai and Jaren easily defeated the assailants, Kai coolly asked the remaining men if they wanted more, or else they should leave. The men fled in terror, apologizing for the disturbance. As Kai was sitting at the table, Jaren was impressed with him, realizing he wasn't just a quiet and stubborn young master as he initially thought. Kai told Jaren that there was no need for them to sit together since they were not travel companions, but Jaren insisted that they eat together. Jaren insisted that he was the one who felt lonely and asked Kai to eat with him. Kai reluctantly agreed, admitting to himself that Jaren had helped him get here safely and he couldn't just coldly ignore him. As they were sitting, they realized they didn't know each other's names yet, so the blue-haired young man introduced himself as Jaren, and Kai replied that he was Seian, and they shook hands. As they resumed their journey, Jaren asked Kai why he was going to go to academy. Kai replied that he had his personal reasons and asked him not to worry. Jiran told him that the headquarters of the Black Mercenary Guild was also located in the capital, so he could take him to the academy. He then asked him about the skill he used at the inn to subdue the huge mercenary with just 2 fingers. Kai vaguely answered that he learned it naturally a long time ago. But the truth, as he recalled to himself, went back to his old days when he began learning the art of doll making. In order to perfectly create a living doll, he had to study the human body in depth, not just by reading all available books, but also by buying corpses and dissecting them. Through this study, he naturally learned all the weak points and pressure points of the human body, but he decided not to tell Jiran all of this. They continued talking together for a long time until time passed quickly. When they arrived at a village called Abli, where they planned to spend the night, Kai suddenly stopped with a look of horror in his eyes. Kai had seen a clear vision. On that day, all the inhabitants of this village would die. At the village inn, Kai was absent-minded, so Jiran asked him if they really had to stay there. Jiran pointed out that the sun had set, and the next village was half a day away, meaning leaving now would force them to spend the night in the open. Jiran spoke to Kai with a curious tone, noticing that his face had been troubled for a while. Then he asked where he was going. Kai replied that he was just going out for some fresh air. Jiran asked Kai to let him accompany him, but Kai calmly explained that he preferred to go out alone to think about something, and there he saw what confirmed his vision. The village was teeming with grim reapers. Kai wondered why he should care about this, as he was no longer a reaper and had no responsibility. He decided that all he had to do was leave early in the morning, but as he was about to return to the inn, a little girl grabbed his clothes. While Kai was lost in his thoughts, a little girl interrupted him and offered him a piece of candy. Kai asked her why, and she replied that she saw he looked sad. The little girl, whose name was Miru, explained that this candy helps her when she's sad. Then her mother called her and she hurried away. Kai felt sad for the innocent girl's fate. After she left, Kai decided to return to the inn, but he realized once again that he had lost his way. Jiran suddenly appeared, so Kai asked him how he found him. Jiran replied that he followed him, because he expected he would get lost, and he was right. Jiran led Kai back to the inn, and then took a shortcut, which made Kai notice that Jiran knew the village well. Jiran explained that he had visited the village many times on business missions, and then instead asked Kai if he had a family. Jiran replied that his entire family had passed away. Kai asked him a direct and shocking question. Did they all die on the same day? Jiran was shocked and confirmed that they had died in an accident when he was young, and asked Kai how he knew that. Kai apologized for his curiosity, saying it was just curiosity. Later that night, Jiran sneaked out of the inn wearing a cloak, but Kai intercepted him in a dark alley and asked him why he was going out. Jiran was surprised and asked him how he knew his whereabouts. Kai claimed he followed him because he seemed suspicious, but the truth, as he thought to himself, was that he suspected Jiran was the one who would bring death to this village, perhaps because of what happened there 20 years ago. Kai's suspicions were confirmed. Jiran was that child he had met 20 years ago. Kai, with his memory as a former Grim Reaper, recalled the details of the tragic incident. He had visited this village 20 years ago because of a terrible plague that was spreading. The villagers, who depended on travelers for their livelihood, were afraid that news of the plague would destroy their economy. So they committed a horrific crime. They took Jiran's family, who were the first to be infected, and buried them alive to hide the matter. Jiran's family had sensed their tragic fate and secretly sent their young son, Jiran, the only one who was not infected, out of the village to save him. But the little boy saw everything and witnessed the murder of his entire family at the hands of his neighbors. Kai continued to narrate Jiran's tragic story, explaining how that little boy witnessed his parents and sister being buried alive by the villagers. The boy fled to save his life, but he returned years later with his heart burning with hatred and a desire for revenge. His plan was to poison the well and kill everyone in the village. Returning to the present, Jiran admitted that everything Kai said was true and that what he was doing was just revenge, but he asked Kai again how he knew all this. Kai explained that sometimes, if a dead soul wishes for it strongly and gets permission from the god of death, it can stay beside its loved ones to protect them. He pointed out that the luck Jiran had so often in his life, including their frequent encounters, was no coincidence, but thanks to the guardian spirits of his family who were guiding and protecting him. Kai said to Jiran, speaking of the large village, that perhaps his family's last wish was to stay close to him, the boy who lost his family at a young age. Jiran didn't believe this story, so Kai told him that his family had appeared to him in a dream and told him everything. Jiran got angry and refused to believe this nonsense, insisting that he had lived for more than 10 years waiting for his moment of revenge. Kai tried to persuade him to change his mind, warning him that if he killed all these people, he would live the rest of his life hearing their horrifying screams. He asked him if he truly believed that revenge would bring him happiness, and then offered to tell him an old story about a man's revenge. Kai began to tell his own story, without revealing his identity, speaking of a man who had a lover more precious than his own life, but others considered her a bad omen and tried to kill her, so the man fought the whole world to protect her. But in a moment of carelessness, his lover was killed. From that moment on, the man's revenge began. He killed everyone who participated in her death until he drowned the world in blood. And when Jiran asked what happened to that man after he completed his revenge, Kai replied that he looked at the world he had destroyed with his own hands and chose death. Kai told Jiran that he wouldn't stop him, but he wanted to clarify one truth. Revenge does not lead to happiness or liberation, but to more misery and a horrific connection to the past. These words affected Jiran, who began to doubt the desire he had held onto for so long, and he wondered if this was the end he wanted, or what his family would have wished for him. When Kai saw his confusion, he offered to leave the matter to him. He asked him to take the poison and keep it, and to give himself time to think. He promised him that if, after careful consideration, he decided that revenge was still more important than his happiness, he could come back to him, and he would give him the poison without a word. Jiran agreed, and handed the poison to Kai. In return, Kai gave him the piece of candy he had taken from the little girl, telling him that someone once told him this was the best medicine when one is sad. Jiran looked at the piece of candy in his hand and burst into hysterical laughter that turned into tears. Then he calmed down a bit, muttering that this was a terrible medicine. In that moment, he felt the presence of his family's guardian spirits comforting him. Later, Shanos appeared, telling him that he had done something incredible. That night, while Kai was in his room, Shanos appeared before him. Shanos scolded him, saying he heard he had caused a lot of trouble. Kai denied doing anything, which infuriated Shanos, who wondered how he could say that after making many Grim Reapers, in the village of Abli, look like fools, reminding him of the rule that anyone who interferes with the work of the god of death can be killed. Kai calmly replied that he never interfered with the Reaper's work, and all he did was prevent his companion, Jiran, from doing something foolish. Shanos smiled sarcastically and commented that Kai had become bold after becoming human again, to which Kai replied that it wasn't his fault, but Shanos' fault for bringing him back to life without asking. Shanos grumbled that he would face a severe reprimand from his superiors because a whole list of humans who were supposed to die were still alive. Kai coolly wished him good luck, which further annoyed Shanos, who called him a rude bastard before disappearing. Deep down, Kai knew the magnitude of the sin he had committed by preventing human deaths, and realized that Shanos was being lenient with him, so he thanked him in a faint voice. Shanos returned and asked Kai in a somewhat reproachful tone to treat him better next time. A few days later, Kai and Jiran finally arrived at Goethe Academy. Kai was impressed by the sight of the academy as if it were the first time his eyes had fallen upon it. Jiran asked Kai why he returned to the place where it was said he had jumped from a building. Kai replied that he wanted to know why he had tried to kill himself, because he couldn't remember anything no matter how hard he tried. He added jokingly that there was no need to worry. Even if he felt the urge to die again, he would stay alive. Jiran was reassured when he noticed that Kai was in a good enough mood to joke. When it was time to say goodbye, Jiran offered to help Kai anytime, asking him to visit the headquarters of the Black Mercenary Guild if he needed anything. Kai thanked him for bringing him to the academy, but Jiran replied that he was the one who should be thanking him, because he had prevented him from letting his hatred take control of him. After Kai's arrival at Goethe Academy, the scene shifts to Count Shuritan's office, where he was examining an investigation report on Viscount Chikon. The Count explained to his son Lucian that there were many things that didn't seem logical about the Viscount. He had appeared in the Empire 10 years ago as a merchant who bought his title with money, but the source of this immense wealth that enabled him to build a power base so quickly remains a mystery, especially since he was just a nameless peddler. The Count told his son that he couldn't uncover anything, and worse, everyone he sent to investigate the Viscount had disappeared. This increased his suspicion that he was hiding a dangerous secret. The conversation then turned to Seian, with Lucian expressing his constant worry for his brother. The Count tried to reassure him that Seian had changed and would be able to manage, but Lucian reminded him that he knew the truth about Goethe Academy better than anyone. Although Goethe Academy prided itself on having the best facilities and professors, its reality was completely different. Most of its students were nobles and members of royal families, and just gathering them in one place was enough to turn the academy into a battlefield, a place where conspiracies and betrayals thrived, where power decided everything, and the weak were mercilessly crushed. Lucian, as a graduate of the academy, knew this truth well and was worried because his brother, who had returned from it half dead the last time, was insisting on going back again, wishing him to hold on this time. Meanwhile, Kai was walking through the academy's corridors, hearing the students' whispers around him. They were expressing their displeasure at his return, saying he should have stayed dead, and calling him trash. Kai realized he had expected this reception, and that he was completely isolated in this place. When he tried to ask some students for the way to the headmaster's office, they ignored him and ran away. As he was perplexed, a young man with brown hair called out to him and offered to show him the way, although he didn't seem happy about it. In the headmaster's office, a fat man wearing a magician's hat greeted him with exaggerated enthusiasm and told him that he had received a letter from his father stating that Seian would be starting over after the accident that caused his memory loss. But the headmaster then asked a question that aroused Kai's suspicion, inquiring if there was anything else his father had sent with him. Kai replied that he thought the headmaster had already received all the news, which confused the headmaster, but Kai insisted on asking if there was something else he was expecting. But Kai told him that he had not brought anything else with him. The headmaster calmly told Kai that he could leave, reminding him to avoid causing any unnecessary trouble from now on, realizing that the man was expecting a bribe, a habit far from the Shuritan family, known for its integrity. At the door, he found the young man still waiting for him, who explained that they shared the same room and he was going to wait to guide him there. This young man was thinking about why he was waiting for Seian, as he didn't really like him. The original Seian was an annoying boy, strong against the weak and weak against the strong, and he always ignored and despised this young man for being a commoner. But he noticed that Seian had changed somehow after the accident. Kai interrupted his thoughts when he thanked him for waiting. The young man was completely shocked, wondering to himself how Seian could thank a commoner. This situation prompted him to ask if the rumor about his memory loss was true, which Kai confirmed. The young man now began to understand the reason for Seian's strange behavior and his not knowing where the headmaster's office was. As they headed to the dormitory, the young man asked Kai if he didn't remember the room either. Indeed, Kai was surprised by its size. The young man explained that the academy was famous for its good facilities and pointed to Kai's bed. He then asked if he remembered his name, and when Kai said no, the young man introduced himself as Kanto. Kai responded by introducing himself as well, which surprised Kanto again, as this was the first time Seian had introduced himself by name even though they had shared a room for a long time. Kanto asked Kai why he returned to the academy after leaving due to an accident. Kai answered clearly that he came back because he wanted to know the reason behind his suicide attempt, and that he had a feeling the reason was here at the academy. Kanto advised him that it would have been better to keep him away from the academy from the start. Kai added that facing and solving unresolved problems directly is the best way. Kanto was impressed by the courage of this response. Kai then asked him where the rags were, which confused Kanto, who didn't understand what he might need them for. Kai replied that he needed them for cleaning. The next morning, Kanto found Kai and asked him in amazement what had happened. He explained that when he woke up, he found Kai's side of the room sparkling clean, so much so that he could see his reflection on the floor, pointing out that although the original Seian was obsessed with cleanliness, he would never have thought of cleaning himself. Kai coolly replied that cleaning is a normal task, and if a person likes cleanliness, they should clean themselves. Kai added that cleaning was one of his hobbies, which further confused Kanto, who wondered if this was something nobles say. Later in the dining hall, Kanto noticed that Kai went to get his food himself without hesitation. Kanto thought to himself that the academy forbids students from bringing their servants, but nobles usually find commoner students to do these tasks for them. Kanto remembered that nobles with limited influence, like the old Seian, sometimes had to get their own food, and they would do so with their heads bowed in shame. But today's Seian showed no sign of this shame. He walked confidently, holding his tray full of food. Kanto realized that Seian had truly changed and was no longer the scoundrel he knew. As Kai was looking for a place to sit, a student stuck his foot out to trip him. Kai immediately understood that the student wanted him to step on his foot to pass. Very calmly, Kai stepped hard on the student's foot, who screamed in pain. He angrily asked him what he was doing, to which Kai innocently replied if this was what he wanted. The student angrily told him to stop the nonsense. When Kai asked if he was trying to trip him, the student got flustered and backed down, afraid of starting trouble with the son of a count. Kai walked away, leaving the student to think about how the foolish Seian who used to run away or glare angrily in the past had changed. Kai joined Kanto, who was stifling his laughter, impressed by the way Kai had handled the situation, and felt that he would enjoy watching him in the coming days. Elsewhere, a student was telling his group's leader, Lord Elnus, about Seian's return. Elnus received the news with a sly smile, commenting that thanks to that bastard, he wouldn't be bored for a while. In the classroom, Kai found himself the target of the students' bullying as they continued to throw trash and papers at him. But when one of them threw a dirty rag at him, his patience ran out, and he threw it back at the person who threw it, quietly and menacingly warning everyone that if they threw dirty trash at him again, he would make sure they understood the meaning of true cleanliness. Before the situation could escalate, a new smiling professor entered the classroom, welcoming everyone. The professor entered the classroom and noticed the tense atmosphere, wondering why, as he was used to the students being happy to see him. The professor spotted Seian, and instead of welcoming him, he decided to embarrass him to celebrate his return, asking him to solve an extremely difficult math problem on the board. Meanwhile, Kai thought to himself that he had realized during his first day at the academy that no one approaches Seian with good intentions. The students mocked him, expecting his epic failure, and the student who had thrown the rag at him sneered, expecting him to fail because math was his worst subject. But Kai calmly walked to the board and solved the complex problem in seconds, leaving the professor and students in a state of shock and disbelief. The students couldn't understand how Kai was able to solve the problem so easily. His roommate Kanto asked him how he managed to do it when math was his worst subject, to which Kai coolly replied that he had studied a little after the accident. The troublesome student was amazed by this transformation. Seian no longer fell into traps, had become self-confident, and now he excelled in his studies as well. Elsewhere, a student was telling his leader, Lord Elnis, that Seian had changed. Others agreed, noting that his aura had completely changed, and that he had become strangely cold, but Elnis refused to believe it, thinking the accident had only made him lose his sense of fear, and that he would go back to crying and begging him as soon as he saw him. Elnis ordered his men to bring Seian to him next time because he needed to talk to him. Later, Kanto found Kai sleeping in the academy's garden, and asked him why he was sleeping like that. Kai explained that he was tired of dealing with everyone trying to start trouble with him. As they were about to return to the dormitory, Kai suddenly stopped and said thank you to an invisible person, explaining that he was thanking them for letting him share the space. Kanto was confused because he didn't see anyone, but in reality, a mysterious person was watching from a distance, and was shocked that Kai was able to notice his presence, the first time he had ever been discovered. Back in their room, Kanto asked Kai about the other person sharing their room, noting that he hadn't come back last night either. Kanto continued his talk with Kai, warning him about their third roommate. He explained that this person is the most dangerous student in the academy, and that no student who angered him has graduated safely. He added that this student shows no mercy to anyone regardless of their status, and has committed many horrific acts of violence. Despite all the trouble he causes, the academy has taken no action against him, leading everyone to assume he belongs to a very influential family. Kanto advised Kai to avoid him completely because his personality is extremely bad. Later, as Kai was walking through one of the academy's corridors, a beautiful girl with long black hair passed by him. In that moment, Kai felt his heart pound hard, and he wondered if it was his heart, not his mind, that remembered this girl. He concluded that the original Seian who had died was likely in love with her, but he settled the matter in his mind, declaring that these feelings no longer exist now. Kai completely ignored her and walked past her without any interest, which surprised and shocked her. Kanto noticed the scene, and explained to him that the girl was Lady Emila Case, the only daughter of the Count Case family. He explained that the original Seian fell in love with her at first sight and used to follow her everywhere, while she despised him intensely, and this one-sided relationship was known to everyone in the academy. Kanto turned to Seian, expressing his relief that Kai had forgotten about it, and then urged him to hold on and stay strong. That night, Kanto was asleep in their room, while a young man with messy black hair snuck in through the window. Kai was awake and confronted him calmly, noting that his steps were too confident for a thief, but he had no murderous intent to be an assassin. The young man lay down on the empty bed, and Kai realized he must be their third roommate, and wondered why he was entering through the window instead of the door. The next morning, Kanto woke up and screamed in terror when he saw their roommate, Rocco. Kai calmly told him that Rocco had arrived last night and that Kanto was sleeping so soundly he didn't feel him. Rocco was annoyed by their noise and immediately ordered them to shut up. Kanto quickly apologized to Rocco for disturbing him. Kai looked at Rocco and realized he was the same mysterious person who had been watching him in the garden the day before. Kai noticed that Rocco looked exhausted and disheveled. Rocco sharply asked Kai what he was looking at. Kai coolly replied that he was looking at his messy hair and clothes. Kanto got nervous at Seian's bold reply and rushed to him, whispering in panic, reminding him that he had warned him not to get involved with this person. Kai ignored Kanto's panicked warnings, and calmly asked their new roommate, Rocco, to use the door instead of the window in the future because entering like that at night was annoying. This comment angered Rocco, who grabbed Kai by his clothes while Kanto screamed in terror. But Kai, instead of being scared, put his hand on his head. Rocco didn't understand why he did that. Kai calmly apologized, explaining that he gets frustrated when he can't talk to someone while looking them in the eye, then suddenly changed the subject, saying it was time for breakfast. Kai invited Rocco to eat together, but Rocco told him to get lost, so Kanto asked Seian to stop provoking him. Kai ignored them and left, saying he would see them in class. Rocco was left bewildered, wondering about this strange young man. Kanto caught up with Kai and asked if he had lost his sense of fear along with his memory, reminding him how dangerous Rocco was and that the old Seian didn't even dare to look him in the eye. Kai sarcastically replied that he couldn't look him in the eye because his hair was covering them. In the dining hall, while Kanto was still trying to warn Kai, another student, Robin, interrupted them and told Kai that Lord Elnis wanted to see him. Kai pretended not to know him, so Robin got angry and ordered him to come to their club room right after class. After they left, Kai asked Kanto who Elnis was, and Kanto told him he was the person who had made the original Seian's life more difficult. Kanto began to tell the story. When Seian first enrolled in the academy, the students were interested in him for his striking beauty, but over time, due to his stubborn personality and inferiority complex, everyone gradually began to shun him. During that period, Elnis, the son of a duke who was like the absolute ruler within the academy, appeared. Elness began to torture Seian cruelly, as if playing with a toy, which made the other students avoid Seian even more, and eventually, they went with the flow and started bullying him alongside Elness. And Elness was targeting Seian again, just when people's perception of him was finally starting to change. Kanto then tried to encourage Kai, advising him to eat well to gather his strength to face those bullies. Kai was touched by this sincere concern and smiled a faint smile, a simple gesture that caused a stir among the female students who were charmed by his smile. Kanto was flustered by the female students' interest in Kai, and whispered to Kai not to smile in that nonchalant way. Meanwhile, in the clubroom, Lord Elness was waiting impatiently, angry that Seian had not yet arrived. While they were in the academy square, Kai noticed that the female students were acting strangely and differently than usual. They were exchanging faint whispers and blushing whenever their eyes passed over him. So he turned to his friend Kanto and asked with genuine curiosity if he found their reaction strange. Kanto smiled broadly and replied that this only proves that the girls here are surprisingly simple and that their hearts can be won with just one friendly smile. As he said that, Kanto thought to himself that his friend Seian's, now Kai, appearance had always been undeniably attractive, but his real problem lay in his old personality, which was a mixture of pathetic stubbornness and introversion. But now, after his personality had radically changed and he had become calmer and more confident, it was not at all surprising that people were starting to show interest in him again, although the vast majority of them still felt confused by this sudden transformation and had mixed feelings towards him. Kanto reassured his friend Kai not to worry too much about these looks, simply explaining to him that the girls were doing it because they were starting to feel attracted to him. But Kai, who seemed uninterested in the matter, suddenly changed the subject, seriously wondering why he hadn't seen that person named Rocco in the classroom yet. As soon as Kai uttered the name Rocco, Kanto froze in place and his face turned pale as if he had heard the name of a ghost. And when Kai calmly added that he had heard Rocco was supposed to be in their same class, Kanto quickly and emphatically denied it, reminding him in a tense tone that he had told him time and again that Rocco was the #1 troublemaker in the academy, someone to be avoided at all costs. Then, in a desperate attempt to distract Kai, Kanto asked with clear sarcasm if he had ever in his life seen a troublemaker attend classes regularly. At that very moment, as if fate were mocking him, the classroom door flew open and slammed against the wall with a bang, and in walked Rocco with his intimidating aura. Kanto was struck by a shock that paralyzed his tongue and made his eyes widen in terror, while Kai replied with perfect calmness, as if nothing had happened, that he had just seen a troublemaker attending class. Kanto leaned over and whispered to his friend in a trembling voice that this was very strange because Rocco never usually comes here. Meanwhile, the other students in the class began to pray silently and mutter prayers, hoping Rocco wouldn't choose to sit near them. But Kai, in a move that surprised everyone and horrified Kanto, calmly raised his hand and told Rocco there was an empty seat right next to him. Kanto panicked at this bold and reckless act. Rocco looked at Kai with a cold gaze and asked why he was pointing, rudely asserting that he could see the empty seat perfectly well, and he seemed extremely annoyed by this unexpected welcome. Rocco completely ignored him and then headed towards another student sitting nearby and called him by his name, and the poor student jumped out of his seat in terror and immediately offered him his spot. Kanto scolded his friend Kai in a low, barely audible voice, wondering why he kept doing this when he had repeatedly warned him to ignore Rocco and not draw his attention. Kai replied with a faint, enigmatic smile that his gaze is naturally and involuntarily drawn to the only person in this place who has a rebellious and distinctive aura, and that he believes being around someone like him would certainly be an enjoyable experience. On a later day, as silence filled their shared room, Kanto asked Kai, who was lying on his bed engrossed in a book, about his plans for the day. Kai looked up from the book and calmly asked back if this day was special for some reason. Kanto enthusiastically explained that it was an official holiday with no classes and wondered in disbelief if Kai really intended to stay in his room all day. Kai confirmed that he indeed planned to do just that, but Kanto, full of energy, insisted that they go out together to enjoy the weather. And although Kai clearly told him he had no desire to go out, Kanto wouldn't take no for an answer, grabbing his hand and stubbornly pulling him out of the room. As soon as they were out on the street, bustling with life and sounds, Kanto expressed his immense joy at being out of the stuffy room, and suggested they head somewhere first for a light snack. Kai agreed with obvious indifference, but he had barely taken a few steps before he stopped abruptly and froze in place, staring with surprise and focus at something down the street. Kanto noticed his sudden stop and asked with genuine concern what was wrong with him, the worry clear on his face. Kai replied in a calm and direct voice that he had seen Rocco. Kanto asked Kai in confusion where they were going now that the plans had changed, to which Kai simply and unhesitatingly replied with an invitation to follow him. Kai set off at a quick pace after Rocco, who was walking down an alley, announcing to his hesitant friend that he was going to follow him to see where he was going, which shocked and stunned Kanto, but he reluctantly followed. Kai continued to track Rocco from a safe distance through the back streets until they reached the entrance of an old, secluded tavern. Kanto tried one last time to stop Kai from entering, reminding him in a desperate tone that he would gain nothing good from provoking someone like Rocco. but Kai reassured him with a calm smile that he would be careful and then confidently stepped inside. A kind-looking elderly man, the tavern owner, greeted them and welcomed them, noting that he had not seen them here before. Kai immediately spotted Rocco sitting alone in a dark corner, drinking from a large mug. So he chose a nearby table and sat with Kanto, who was fidgeting anxiously in his seat. The owner approached and asked Kai if he knew the young man sitting over there, Rocco, to which Kai honestly replied that they only knew each other by name and nothing more. The man served them 2 cold drinks, kindly apologizing that they weren't alcoholic due to their young age, and invited them to drink as they pleased as they were his guests. Kai thanked him politely and then began to drink the beverage with a speed and veracity that astonished Kanto. As soon as Kai finished his drink, he suddenly and unexpectedly announced that they were leaving now, which confused Kanto, who asked him to wait a bit. Kai went to the owner to pay for the drinks he had served them, but the old man refused to take his money, explaining with a smile that it was all right since they were apparently Rocco's friends. Kai replied with politeness and respect that they weren't friends yet, but he would gladly accept his generosity in the future when they truly became friends. After Kai and Kanto left the tavern, the owner chuckled softly and went over to Rocco's table, telling him what Kai had just said, and commenting that this young man seemed like a really interesting person. But Rocco replied with complete coldness, without lifting his eyes from his mug, that he was not interested at all. Outside, Kanto asked his friend Kai the reason for their quick departure after all the trouble he went through to get there. Kai calmly explained that he felt that place was like a private sanctuary for Rocco, and that he had initially followed him out of pure curiosity to see where he was going, but he didn't want to invade the privacy of someone resting in their safe space. Kanto looked at his friend and was once again convinced that he was a truly eccentric person. He then urged him to hurry out of that dark back alley, about which there were bad rumors of muggings and theft. But before they could continue on their way, a sharp scream for help reached their ears from an adjacent alley. They rushed to look and saw a group of men surrounding 2 girls and clearly harassing them, and one of the girls was Amila, whom they knew. Kanto shouted with anger and worry that they must intervene and help the 2 girls immediately, but he was surprised by Kai's calm and indifferent reaction. Kai reminded his friend that they had seen Amila before as if it didn't concern him, at which point Kanto yelled at him angrily, pointing to the other girl who was trembling beside her. Kanto yelled at Kai, his voice filled with anger and panic, asserting that the girl standing there was his younger sister, and he wondered in utter shock how he could have forgotten the faces of his own family members so easily. In the midst of his extreme panic, Kanto realized they had no chance of defeating all those tough men on their own, so he turned to Kai and asked him to wait here while he went as fast as he could to get help from the guards. Kai remained standing motionless, repeating the words, "younger sister," in confusion and bewilderment, as if he were hearing them for the first time. Meanwhile, the girl who was supposedly his sister was telling her friend Emila earlier how she had decided to go out with her for a walk in the city streets since there were no classes that day. She remembered hearing a rumor about a merchant selling rare and precious jewels deep in an alley, so she got curious and decided to go in a little to look for him. But unfortunately, she didn't find him, and suddenly, she and her friend found themselves violently pulled into a deserted, dark side alley by a group of intimidating-looking thugs, and the villains were smiling a terrifying smile that revealed their malicious and evil intentions towards the 2 girls. Emila, the girl's friend, tried to use her family's influence to threaten them by revealing her prestigious identity, but they paid no attention to her threat at all, and one of them told her with a sneer that they would get rid of her after they were done having fun with her in a secret place where no one could find her. Then he grabbed Kai's sister's face harshly, telling her to stop whining and crying. In a desperate, hopeless attempt to defend herself, Kai's sister gathered all her courage and bit the man's hand with unexpected force. The man screamed from the sudden, intense pain, and for a moment couldn't believe she had actually dared to bite him. Then he flew into a rage, and as he raised his hand and was about to slap her hard, she shut her eyes tightly, expecting the painful blow, but she felt nothing. She slowly and cautiously opened her eyes to find that Kai had intervened at the last second, grabbing the man's strong fist and stopping it in midair. Kai apologized to the assailant with a strange calmness, but told him in a firm and cold tone that he could not allow him to harm this girl. The assailant asked him with great anger who he was and why he was interfering in business that didn't concern him, to which Kai calmly and confidently replied that he was her brother. The girl was completely shocked by this unexpected answer. Kai politely asked the man again to back off and leave the 2 girls alone, but the latter angrily and stubbornly refused, vowing to beat him until he was crawling on the ground begging for mercy. Kai interrupted him coolly, asking him to wait for just one moment. Then he took out a clean white handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his hand that had touched the assailant. After feeling that everything was all right now, he told the assailant with a smile that he could now resume his attack as he pleased. The man exploded with rage, thinking that Kai was mockingly humiliating him, claiming his hands were so dirty he needed to clean them after touching him, and he lunged at him with his fist with all his might, but Kai dodged the blow with incredible grace and agility. Kai grabbed the charging assailant's arm and with a quick movement pressed a specific nerve point in his arm, which made the man let out a high-pitched scream of intense, excruciating pain. Kai reassured him in a calm and frightening tone that there was no need to worry. Although the pain was very sharp now, he would be able to move his arm normally again by tomorrow morning. As the second assailant saw what happened to his companion and rushed towards him in anger, brandishing a dagger, Kai easily dodged his attack and offered him some friendly advice. The assailant tried to stab Kai with the dagger again, but Kai grabbed his arm firmly and held it in place, warning him in a low voice that if he continued to hurt people this way, he would never die peacefully in the future, explaining to him that the grudges and souls of the dead carry a power far greater than he could ever imagine. Kai increased his pressure on the man's arm, and the latter screamed in pain, begging. Kai looked at the rest of the assailants and calmly asked them if they still wanted to continue fighting, asserting that he had plenty of time to deal with all of them one by one, so they were terrified and all fled, scattering in every direction. After the assailants disappeared into the darkness, Emila approached Kai and thanked him for his intervention and for saving her and her friend. But Kai walked right past her without paying her any attention, as if she didn't exist. He approached his sister, who was still in shock, and asked with genuine concern if she was okay and if she could stand on her feet. She replied in a low voice that she was fine, but as soon as she tried to stand up on her own, she winced in pain. Kai noticed that she might have twisted her ankle during the scuffle and offered to support her so she could walk, but she sharply refused and told him to leave her alone. Kai replied calmly and insistently that it was impossible for him to leave her in this difficult situation and go. She was touched by his words and his sincere gaze, and after a moment of hesitation, she finally accepted his help to get up, and they left the place together, with him carefully supporting her so she could move. At that crucial moment, Kanto arrived with a group of guards. Kanto asked his friend Kai where he had been all this time. Kai told him he had an urgent matter to take care of and asked him to look after the two girls now, to which Kanto immediately agreed. Kanto wondered where the other men who attacked them were, while the guard asked Emila if everyone was okay. Emila replied yes, staring at Kai's back as he walked away with clear resentment. Kanto then asked her again if she had been hurt in any way, and from the roof of a nearby dark building, Rako was sitting and watching the entire scene in silence, thinking to himself that this boy, Kai, was no ordinary person at all. When Kai escorted his sister all the way to the entrance of the towering student dormitory, the girl came to a hesitant stop and informed him in a faint voice that she could continue on her own from there, as if she still couldn't quite believe that he had accompanied her this entire distance. Kai looked down at her pale face and asked with genuine deep concern if she was truly all right. She simply nodded and replied that she was, though her eyes still held an expression of utter bewilderment. However, Kai was not convinced by her quick answer, insisting on making sure she wasn't just feigning strength, and he asked her in a firm tone to tell him immediately if she felt the slightest bit of pain or dizziness, explaining that it would be a true catastrophe if she were left with any side effects from the incident. A wave of confusion washed over her, and the girl silently wondered about the reason for this dramatic transformation and his sudden behavior as a real, caring brother. Her memory bitterly took her back to the past, when she had tried so hard to get close to him, naively believing they could be good siblings despite their different mothers. But he had cruelly shouted in her face at the time and ordered her to stay away from him as if she were a plague. His harsh words still echoed in her ears, when he had coldly informed her back then that he had no intention of treating a bastard like her as a member of his prestigious family. And since then, he had always deliberately ignored her, pretending not to know her even if they passed each other in the hallways. Kai interrupted her long silence and reverie, calmly explaining that he didn't know if she was aware of it or not, but at the present moment, he honestly possessed no memories of her or their past together. Her eyes widened in complete shock, so Kai told her that he had lost all his memories following a recent accident, and only in that moment did she realize that this was the only logical explanation for his sudden and incomprehensible change in attitude towards her. Kai told her that since things had come to this, it was best he inform her of something beforehand, but she quickly cut him off, her tone carrying a mix of warning and despair, reminding him that when his memory inevitably returned, he would deeply regret his kindness and helping her, which is why she asked him to pretend from now on that he didn't know her, just as he always had. She added in a trembling voice that this was the only safe way for them both to avoid pain and suffering in the future. But Kai, instead of listening, gently took her hand, causing her to freeze in place, and asked her a simple, surprising question. What was her name? He then told her seriously that if she couldn't remember, she should forget the matter as it is, because he wouldn't. He added that he dislikes repeating himself, but since she was his sister, a fact he now understood, he would ask her for her name once more. After a few moments of hesitation and internal conflict, she answered in a barely audible voice that her name was Eris. Kai repeated her name as if tasting it for the first time, then gently and tenderly patted her on the head in a way she had never experienced from him before. He then told her with a faint smile that he would see her again, and quietly left. Eris stood frozen in place, watching him walk away, recalling his warm words when he had clearly declared he was her brother. But she quickly chided herself, sadly telling herself not to get her hopes up, as it was impossible that he had truly accepted her as a member of his family so easily. The next day, as they were eating, Kanto asked his friend Kai with visible concern what exactly happened yesterday, inquiring where the men who were harassing the girls had disappeared to, and why he had returned to the dorm so late at night. Kai remembered that after he parted ways with Eris, feeling satisfied for helping her, he had found himself lost once again in the sprawling academy campus. And due to his complete unfamiliarity with the place, he couldn't find his way back until late at night when the grounds were completely empty of students he could ask. But not wanting to admit this, he simply told Kanto that he had some personal matters to attend to, and that what mattered in the end was that everyone was safe and unharmed. He then changed the subject and told Kanto he had an important question regarding his siblings. Kanto looked at him with great surprise that Kai had forgotten even his memories of his own family, and told him that Krav is his younger brother and is currently studying with him at the same academy. Kai anxiously wondered to himself if he also hated his younger brother Krav as much as he had hated Eris. Kanto told him that the rumors circulating in the academy say that Krav is his half-brother from a different mother, and perhaps that's why the old Seian, Kai's original name, disliked his younger siblings, and the relationship between the siblings themselves was always tense and hostile. Kai wondered about the reason for the particularly bad relationship between Krav and Aris, since they were also from different mothers and should have shared a similar situation. Then he curiously asked Kanto about his total number of mothers, as the matter seemed incredibly complicated. Kanto replied that as far as he knew, only Kai and his older brother Lucian were from the same mother, while both Aris and Krav had different mothers. But Kanto clarified to Kai that he wasn't entirely sure, as all he knew were just rumors passed around by the students. Kai thought about the complexity of his father's romantic affairs and how they led to this broken family, and he realized that this toxic mix of relationships was the reason for the deep loneliness and sadness that was always etched on Eris's face. Kai felt that this whole situation was becoming a personal annoyance to him, and he felt a desire to change it. At that moment, one of the students, who turned out to be a messenger for Lord Elnus, slammed his hand on the table with a loud bang, and arrogantly asked Kai if he thought their words and warnings were just a joke. Kai replied with perfect calm, maintaining his cool, that their words were certainly not a joke, but his voice was far too loud and disruptive to the other students in the hall. Kai coolly asked the messenger his purpose for coming and causing such a commotion, which infuriated the messenger, who loudly questioned him about his failure to show up at the clubroom the previous time as ordered. Kai simply replied, without a hint of concern, that he had completely forgotten about it. The messenger complained bitterly that he had been severely reprimanded by Lord Elnus because of Kai's disregard, so Kai offered a brief apology, explaining that it wasn't intentional and he didn't mean to embarrass him. Kai then asked the messenger his purpose this time, and he was told that he had come to deliver another message from Lord Elnus, which was an invitation to a special welcoming party in the clubroom after classes ended that evening. Kai replied calmly and steadily that he understood the message, and then coolly asked if there was anything else he wanted to say before he left. The messenger felt extremely flustered, wondering to himself why Kai wasn't afraid or affected by the mention of Lord Elnus's name, and how his emotionless eyes made him feel like a child, a misbehaving child about to be scolded by an adult. Because of this strange feeling of awe, the messenger quickly backed away and left the place, muttering that he would see him in the evening. Kanto asked Kai if he would be alright going there, to which Kai replied that he would go this time because he was curious to know the reason for this strange insistence from Elnus to see him. Kai then suggested they head back to class since they had finished their meal. As they were leaving the crowded cafeteria, Kai suddenly stopped in his tracks. Kanto immediately noticed that one of Kai's relatives was nearby. Kai instantly recognized his sister Eris carrying her food tray, but Kanto quickly drew his attention to the young man walking maliciously behind her, explaining that this was his younger brother, Krav. Kai looked in surprise towards the sharp-featured young man Kanto pointed at, and Kanto confirmed that this was Krav Shuritan, his younger brother who attends the academy with them. In a deliberately cruel move, Krav intentionally bumped into Aris, causing her to fall painfully to the ground and her food to scatter everywhere amidst the shock of the students. He looked down on her with disdain and commented loudly that it was his extreme misfortune to see her so early in the morning, adding with a sarcastic smile that her current state on the floor was the most fitting for her, and that she should always remember and know her true place in this family. Eris thought with pain and resignation that she indeed should know her place. Unlike her other siblings, she was just a worthless, insignificant being, born of a maid after a single, fleeting night's mistake, and that she had unfortunately grown accustomed to facing such bullying and humiliation on a daily basis. At that moment, before Krav could go any further, Kai approached with calm steps, commenting loud enough for everyone to hear that it was foolish to ask her if she was okay in this situation. He then bent down, extended his hand, and gently helped her to her feet, which greatly astonished Krav, who had never expected this intervention. Kai took out a clean handkerchief from his clothes and began to wipe her soiled clothes and her hand from the food residue in front of everyone. After that, Kai slowly turned towards Krav and asked in a cold tone if his collision with Eris was just an unintentional mistake. Krav seemed momentarily confused by this unexpected situation, which made Kai repeat the question with greater intensity. Krav replied with sarcasm and arrogance, wondering when Kai had started to care about him and Eris, as they were nothing more than insects to him in the past. From this haughty response, Kai understood that the act was not a mistake at all, but entirely deliberate. Krav yelled in his face, questioning the nonsense he was spouting and what business it was of his to interfere in the first place. Suddenly, and without any warning, Kai struck Krav across the face with a resounding slap that echoed through the cafeteria, stunning everyone present. He then asked him with icy calm, as her older brother and his older brother as well, if it wasn't his natural right to intervene. Krav was completely shocked, placing a hand on his reddened cheek and asking how he dared to hit him. Kai replied coolly that what he did was not an assault, but merely an older brother correcting the deviant behavior of his younger brother. And when Krav angrily shouted, questioning when he had become his older brother, Kai replied with decisive words, "Starting from now." He told him in a warning tone that he hoped he would remember this new reality well, the fact that he is his older brother and Eris is his younger sister, from this moment forward. He then stepped forward and grabbed him forcefully by the collar, and seriously ordered him to never forget it, because if he dared to forget, he might have to hit him again to remind him. After letting go of him as he trembled in shock, Kai called out to Eris, and quietly told her they should go, as she desperately needed to change her soiled clothes before the next class. Eris agreed, still in a state of shock and disbelief, but she quickly came to her senses and alerted him as he walked away confidently that he was going the wrong way again. After Eris guided him to the correct path towards the girls' dormitory, Kai asked her to walk a few steps ahead of him. She was surprised and perhaps a little amused, thinking he might be embarrassed for getting the way wrong in front of her. She let out a light laugh for the first time in a long while, thinking to herself how his aura and personality had become completely different from the cruel brother she had known her whole life. Kai suddenly stopped walking, which made her wonder with concern if she had laughed too loudly and bothered him. He turned towards her, looked directly into her eyes, and told her that she shouldn't forget either. When she asked in confusion what he meant, he reached out and gently patted her head, replying in a warm tone that she should never forget the fact that he is her older brother. Kai added that he, for his part, would also never forget the fact that she is his dear younger sister. Upon hearing these words, Eris tried desperately to hold back the tears that had welled up in her eyes, but she couldn't hold on any longer and broke into a long-awaited, silent cry, a cry that mixed sorrow and joy, and she replied yes as she wept. Kai was surprised by her emotional reaction and felt in his heart a sincere hope that she would no longer feel lonely or sad anymore. That night, Lord Elnus sat angrily in the luxurious clubroom, impatiently asking his messenger if he had delivered the message correctly and clearly. The terrified messenger assured him he had done exactly as ordered. Elnus wondered with intense anger how Kai had not come despite that, and vowed that he would see how long he could continue to ignore his words and authority. The next day, everything changed for Eris. In the classroom, she was surrounded by her classmates who were enthusiastically asking her about the sudden and amazing change in her brother's personality, and how he had heroically saved her from the harassers and then defended her in the cafeteria. Eris thought to herself that she had been receiving a lot of questions and attention about her brother lately, something she was never used to. Eris's classmates told her that Kai was incredibly cool and brave when he saved her in the cafeteria that day, and commented excitedly that he was becoming more handsome and charming lately. And Eris felt an overwhelming happiness because everyone was now seeing him as a good and kind person, not the cold bully they once knew. Nearby, Emila was listening to this conversation, feeling angry and jealous. She admitted to herself that she had always hated Seian, finding him annoying and arrogant. But lately, and strangely, she had begun to think that he had some likable aspects she hadn't noticed before. Her anger grew even more because he was completely ignoring her now that she had started to care about him. Suddenly, the students' conversation was cut short by a loud and terrifying crashing sound from outside. All the students, in a state of curiosity and panic, rushed to the window to see what was happening. As Eris was about to look as well, her brother Kai suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and in a swift motion, he hugged her tightly and covered her eyes with his hands, telling her in a firm and calm voice not to look at the gruesome scene below. Horrified whispers spread among the students that someone had jumped from the roof of the building. Eris was sitting in her usual classroom atmosphere with her classmates, but the silence was heavy with tension, and one of the girls was still trembling involuntarily whenever her memory replayed the horrific scene she had witnessed with her own eyes. Wishing deep down that she had never looked in that direction, Eris asked her friend in a low voice if the scene was truly that terrible, and the girl confirmed with a shaky voice that Eris was fortunate not to have seen it. The conversation then shifted, and the girl expressed a sudden and intense admiration for Kai, saying in a dreamy tone that for the first time in her life, she wished she had a kind older brother like Seian. Emila, who was listening to the conversation, commented that Seian had indeed changed a lot, In the recent past, he would barely notice Eris's existence and would ignore her completely. She added with an analytical tone that it seemed a radical and significant change had occurred in his personality. At this, Eris couldn't hide her happiness. She beamed a radiant smile and confirmed to them that he had indeed changed a great deal for the better. At that moment, as if fate were responding to their conversation, Kai approached Eris and calmly called her name. She immediately stood up, overjoyed, calling him by the title, brother, which had become dear to her heart. Kai seriously asked her if she knew anything about the student who had recently died, who had been in the same classroom with her. Eris replied that her name was Melina, adding the important detail that she was a full scholarship student. Kai showed visible surprise at the fact that she was on a scholarship. At this point, Kanto intervened to clarify the matter for Kai, pointing out that most students from commoner backgrounds cannot afford the academy's exorbitant tuition fees. Therefore, they rely entirely on the scholarship system offered by the administration, a system that exempts the student from all fees provided they achieve excellent grades on the first exam. But this financial support is immediately cut off if the student fails to maintain their academic excellence until graduation. Eris added, recalling her memories of the deceased girl, that Melina was a very quiet person by nature and was never in any notable conflict with anyone at all. On the contrary, she was such an ideal student that she never once lost the top spot in the class rankings throughout her studies. Kai asked a specific question about whether she had seemed exhausted or tired lately. Eris remembered that her skin had looked somewhat pale in the days leading up to her death, and she wondered if it was due to her extreme exhaustion from studying so much and the psychological pressure to maintain her scholarship. Kai calmly told her that he understood, and that they would talk later. Then he left abruptly. Eris wondered to herself with concern about the reason for his sudden interest in this sad matter. As Kai was walking down the hall with Kanto, Kanto asked him about the reason for his sudden and strange question on the topic. Kai answered him with a brief phrase, saying he would tell him the details later, leaving Kanto drowning in his confusion. Suddenly, Kanto stopped in his tracks, so Kai asked him why. Kanto nodded his head towards a person standing a few meters away, calling him by the name Elnus. And so Kai found himself face to face with Elnus, who greeted him with a contrived smile, saying he hadn't seen him in a long time. Kai replied with an icy coldness, questioning if their fragile relationship even permitted such a warm greeting, before confronting him directly and without preamble, stating that he had heard Elnus's constant bullying was the real reason the original Seian had attempted his tragic suicide. Elnus feigned complete ignorance and asked him dismissively what he was talking about, asserting with false confidence that his suicide attempt had nothing to do with him whatsoever. But Kanto was thinking to himself with certainty that Elnus was indeed the direct cause of Seian's suicide attempt. In that moment of confrontation, Kai felt the original Seian's heart beating powerfully on its own inside his chest, but he realized this feeling was completely different from previous times. This time it wasn't admiration or jealousy, but pure, deep fear. Elnus thought to himself that although he had heard the circulating rumors that Seian had changed, he hadn't truly believed them until this moment. He wondered to himself about the secret behind that sharp and piercing gaze in Kai's eyes, which he had never seen in him before. With complete calm and confidence, Kai asked Elnus his specific reason for coming to see him. Elnus told him in a condescending tone that he had summoned him several times but he didn't come, which forced him to come himself, and he sharply asked him the reason for not responding to his orders. Kai replied with utmost simplicity that he had forgotten. Elnus immediately interpreted this response as Kai deliberately ignoring him, but Kai, with his cool composure, explained the subtle difference to him, saying that ignoring implies a premeditated intention not to show up from the beginning, whereas forgetting means the matter had simply slipped his mind, and that the two meanings have a significant difference in intent. Kai then asked him in a calm, analytical tone if he suffered from an inferiority complex that drove him to assert his dominance over others. Elnus flew into a rage at this direct accusation, so Kai skillfully changed the subject and asked him again about his reason for summoning him in the first place. Elnus was visibly flustered and admitted with a stammer that there was no particular reason or important matter. At that point, Kai seriously asked him not to summon him in the future if there was no real reason to do so. Elnus was completely shocked by this bold and unexpected response. So Kai continued, explaining that they both had more important things to do and had no time to waste on empty summons, which is why he was asking him not to call for him uselessly again. Kai then turned to leave, coolly announcing that their conversation was over at this point. Elnus shouted after him that he would deeply regret treating him with such contempt and disrespect that day. Kai turned around calmly and asked with feigned curiosity how exactly he would do that. Elnus was taken aback by his reaction, so Kai calmly continued to press him, asking him to explain specifically how he planned to make him regret his actions. Elnus became completely flustered and stammered, unable to find a suitable response. So Kai told him that if nothing came to mind right now, he could take his time to think about it, adding with a sarcastic smile that he would be waiting. He then coolly bid him farewell and left, leaving Elnus standing there, trembling with intense rage and vowing under his breath that he would never forget today's humiliation. As they walked away, Kanto burst into loud laughter. Kai asked him the reason for all the laughter, and Kanto, wiping away tears, replied that Kai had completely crushed Elnis's pride and left him speechless with a ridiculously silly expression on his face. Suddenly their laughter was cut short by a loud commotion coming from outside. They rushed to the nearest balcony to see what had happened, only to be met with the shocking sight of a female student who had fallen to the ground from the upper floors. A student looked up and screamed in a terrified voice that someone was still standing on the edge up there. It was Rocco, whose appearance and position suggested that he was the one who had pushed the student. The news spread like wildfire through the academy's halls. One student told her friend that Rocco had pushed a student from the roof and was caught red-handed at the scene and was now being held in solitary confinement. Her classmate added with certainty that she was sure the professors and the academy administration were completely convinced that Rocco was the culprit. Later that day, as Kai and Kanto sat in silence at a dinner table, Kanto asked Kai in a serious tone if he truly believed someone like Rocco could have killed her. Kai replied with surprising confidence that he believed the girl had committed suicide this time as well. Kanto was shocked by this assertion and asked him how he could be so sure. Kai thought to himself that when he worked as a Grim Reaper in his past life, the easiest souls to guide to the other world were those of people who had committed suicide. They had no remaining attachment to life and would follow him with ease, without needing much persuasion. He clearly remembered that the soul of the girl, Melina, who had died a few days ago, had immediately followed the Grim Reaper sent for her. He added in his mind that if Rocco had killed this girl, her angry and vengeful spirit would be hovering around him now, seeking revenge. But of course he couldn't explain all that to Kanto. To change the subject, Kai asked Kanto if he knew anything about the girl who had died this time. Kanto noticed he was clearly changing the subject again, but he answered that she was a scholarship student just like Melina and she didn't have any particular problems or enemies at school, expressing his deep confusion at the repetition of these tragic incidents among scholarship students. Kai told him that an old story he had heard a long time ago had suddenly come to his mind. Kanto curiously asked him about the story. Kai began to narrate the story, explaining that it was about 3 people who were caught in a fierce storm and ended up on a small, remote, uninhabited island. They tried to survive in every possible way, clinging to the hope that someone would inevitably come to rescue them. Kai revealed that this story was actually a real experience he had when he was a Grim Reaper. At the time, he found it strange and perplexing. They were working so hard to live despite all the odds, and he wondered why it was destined in the records of fate that they would die soon. After a short period of despair, one of them could no longer endure and chose to end his own life, starting the very next day. The 2 remaining people committed suicide one after the other, influenced by their friend's act. Kai explained that suicide, as a concept, is incredibly contagious. When a person going through a difficult situation chooses death as an escape, others who are experiencing similar circumstances are deeply affected. Kanto asked him if he was implying that the recent suicide was a similar case influenced by Melina's suicide. Kai replied that there was one thing he could be sure of, and that was that this was not the end yet. Kai then looked across the hall at another girl and asked Kanto if she was also a scholarship student. Kanto confirmed that this girl, named Gloomy, was also a scholarship student. Kai commented that the only clear commonality between the 2 deceased girls was that they were scholarship students living under immense pressure. Kanto immediately realized what Kai was implying and asked him in shock and horror if he thought the next suicide case would be Gloomy. Kanto demanded a logical basis for this prediction, to which Kai replied that it was just an internal feeling, but he had a high degree of confidence in its accuracy. Kai thought to himself that a person being followed by a Grim Reaper is very likely to die in the near future, and he could now clearly see a Grim Reaper following Gloomy, sticking to her like a shadow. Meanwhile, Rocco was sitting in a solitary confinement cell, feeling extremely bored, wondering why no one had come to question or investigate him after all this time. He began to replay in his mind exactly what had happened on that fateful day. In a clear flashback, Rocco was standing alone on the roof of the building. When a distraught-looking girl came up to him, he asked her why she had come up to a place like this all by herself. Rocco recalls the details of what happened. He was on the roof asking the girl to come down and step away from the edge because the place was dangerous. But instead of complying, she suddenly let out a desperate scream and threw herself from the top. Reiko quickly moved to the edge from which the girl had fallen, as he didn't understand the reason for her sudden and horrifying fall. And this exact situation led to the spread of the rumor that Rocco was the one who had pushed her. In his isolation, Rocco thought that under these suspicious circumstances, it would have been easy to accuse him of murder, and he wondered why they were taking so long with the investigation. He concluded that the huge donations that come to the Academy in his family's name were probably making them hesitant to give up such an important source of funding. But in the end, he decided he didn't care about the outcome, whatever it might be. He was interrupted by Kai's calm voice, commenting that he seemed far too relaxed for someone in his position. Rocco asked in surprise who he was to come looking for him in confinement, especially after he had bribed the guards to get in. Kai replied with a strange phrase that he came because he was worried about him as his roommate. which confused Rocco because of the unfamiliar wording. Kai took a bottle of liquor from his coat and told him that the owner of the tavern Rocco frequents had asked him to deliver a message. The old man was very worried about Rocco's absence for several days and had come looking for Kai because he was the only person he knew who was close to Rocco. Kai commented that Rocco seemed to have a special and strong relationship with that old man, but Rocco cut him off sharply and told him not to interfere in his private affairs. Kai announced that he had delivered the first message and would be leaving now. As he was walking away, Rocco thought to himself that Kai was an eccentric person with unpredictable actions. But Kai paused at the door for a moment and told him that the old man had also asked him to deliver another verbal message, which was that if he continued to get involved in trouble and misunderstandings in this absurd way, he would close the tavern and leave for another place without his knowledge. He added that the old man asked him to clear his name quickly and visit the tavern as soon as possible. Kai then left, leaving Rocco angry and frustrated by this indirect threat. Elsewhere in the academy, one of Elnis's followers was informing him that he had seen the old tavern owner who came to see Rocco greeting Seian, and that Seian had gone right after that to check on Rocco himself in confinement. From this information, Elnis concluded that this meant Seian and Rocco were much closer than he had imagined. Elnis thought to himself that even without this new reason, he couldn't stand Rocco because of his always volatile and provocative behavior. He noticed that the academy administration was trying to quietly cover up the whole incident, but he decided that he couldn't let the matter slide so easily, and that he desperately needed to contact his father and leverage his influence. The third student, Gloomy, was standing on the edge of the academy's towering building at night. She sighed in despair before throwing her body into the void. As she was falling, she wondered to herself why she felt nothing at all. But before she could hit the ground, Kai had arrived at the right moment and used his threads to suspend her in the air, and caught her in his arms. Gloomy looked at him in complete shock and called his name, Seian. Kai, still holding her, told her that he had many questions for her, and asked her to give him some of her time. In the headmaster's office, the man was shouting angrily, "Damn it all!" wondering why these scholarship beggars kept causing all these problems. He thought angrily about their audacity to stir up trouble like this. At that moment, his assistant burst into the office yelling, "Headmaster, sir!" He informed him that a disaster had struck. The headmaster immediately asked with concern, "What? A disaster?" wondering if another student had tried to jump or something of the sort. The assistant denied it, so the headmaster angrily asked what the grave matter was then. The assistant informed him that the J-Mill family and other noble families had sent their representatives. The assistant explained that these representatives had announced they would be closely monitoring how the academy handles this incident and the accused culprit, Rocco, and demanded the matter be concluded decisively and quickly. The headmaster realized that the J-Mill family was Elnis's family, and that they represented the true power behind the Chezarus Empire. The headmaster was shocked that they had sent a warning and slammed his hand on the desk in anger. He asked his assistant where the rest of the officials were, and was told they were gathered in the meeting room. The headmaster ordered his assistant to take him there immediately. As he walked, he thought to himself that he could absolutely not let them discover that secret matter, and decided he would end this investigation as quickly as possible, just as they demanded. Meanwhile, Kai and Kanto were standing outside the meeting room. Kanto commented that they were holding an impromptu trial for Rocco. Kai was surprised by the term impromptu trial. Kanto explained that this was a rare event that could only happen if requested by a noble of count rank or higher, or their representative. Kanto added that rumors said the J-Mill family was the one who initiated the matter this time, and even brought all their noble allies with them. Kanto concluded that Elnis was the one behind this move, as he had never been a fan of Rocco. Kai replied that this situation was perfect, because they needed a stage like this to settle the matter anyway. Kai noticed that Kanto seemed more worried about Rocco than he expected. Kanto nervously asked if he was talking about him, then admitted that perhaps he had grown attached to him too, having been roommates for a year. Kai reassured him not to worry too much about Rocco, but Kanto insisted that nobles were capable of fabricating charges out of thin air if it suited them. Kai replied that if the nobles bring a non-existent crime, they will confront them with a crime that already exists, and told him not to worry. Kanto wondered about the meaning of the existing crime. Kai told him they should first head to the trial venue, which was supposed to start that afternoon. Kanto followed him, still asking about the nature of this crime that already exists. When he asked if he wasn't going to tell him this time either, Kai ignored him. In the trial hall, the session for the recent murder case was announced to have begun. A professor wondered with concern if Rocco had really killed the girls, to which another professor calmly replied that the truth had not yet been revealed, and that no one really knew what had happened yet. In the trial hall, the official, the J-Mill family representative, ordered the accused to be brought in. Rocco entered and stood alone in the center of the hall. The official asked him directly if he was the one who killed the student, Kesha. Rocco replied calmly and steadily that he had not killed anyone. This answer angered the J-Mill family representative, who wondered to himself about the look in Rocco's eyes, and how he dared to look at him with such insolence. The other representative shouted at Rocco to stop playing dumb, asserting that there were witnesses who saw him commit the crime. Rocco realized in that moment that they were trying to frame him for this. The representative ordered the witnesses to be brought in. 2 students entered and sat at the stand. The 2 witnesses began their testimony. They claimed they had seen Rako standing near the edge of the roof, and that before she fell, Kesha looked as if she were begging him to save her life. Reiko watched them, thinking that he had to reveal that thing, even though he knew it might cause him a headache. He continued to think that he believed the man who had sent Kai was hoping to use him. Kai clenched his fist, then suddenly stood up and asked the 2 witnesses if they could take responsibility for their testimony. Kanto, sitting next to him, was shocked and asked him in astonishment what he thought he was doing. Kai ignored Kanto's warnings and began to walk steadily toward the center of the hall. Kanto thought in terror that this was an official trial sanctioned by the nobles, and that Kai's intervention now could get him charged with obstruction of justice. Kai reached Rako, who asked him his identity. Kai replied that he was Seian. Rako retorted sharply, asking if he had asked for his name. Kai offered to help him get out of this mess. He proposed that he make a deal with him. Elnis was watching the scene from afar, wondering what these 2 bastards were doing. His companion suggested he demand their expulsion, but Elnis decided to watch the situation. Elnis smiled slyly, realizing that if he played his cards right, he could accuse Seian of obstructing justice. Rako agreed to the deal, so Kai confirmed he had given his word. Kai turned towards the 2 witnesses and asked them again if they could swear that their testimony contained not a single lie. One of the witnesses became flustered and answered hesitantly that of course he wouldn't dare to lie in a place like this. Kai stared at them coldly and asked if they were confirming that this testimony was the truth. The witnesses began to stutter and sweat, and answered hesitantly that they thought it was the truth. Elnis watched this collapse in anger, thinking what a fool he was for trusting these 2 idiots. Kai approached the main platform and addressed the headmaster directly, asking Jabiru if he knew anything about the 2 deceased female students. Headmaster Jabiru looked confused and shouted, denying any knowledge, asserting that all he knew was that they were students at this academy. Kai replied calmly, reminding the headmaster that he was aware the 2 deceased students were scholarship recipients. The headmaster scoffed, wondering if they really were, and what importance that held. Kai began to explain to the audience that this academy, as everyone knows, is highly prestigious. He clarified that upon graduating from it, even a commoner could achieve great success. Graduates are treated with respect in any field of work, and if they are lucky, they might find a position in the royal court. Kai continued, explaining that this is the reason why scholarship students from ordinary backgrounds fear expulsion due to bad grades more than they fear death itself. Kai then leveled his accusation, pointing out that the 2 deceased female students had chosen the wrong path to raise their falling grades, and that the person who suggested this path to them was none other than Headmaster Jabiru himself. The headmaster was stunned and shouted in denial. The J-Mill family representative stood up angrily and confronted the headmaster, reminding him that forging grades is a crime under continental law. The headmaster exploded in anger, calling Kai's words absurd and nonsense, and insisted that it was impossible for him to do something like that. Kai pressed him further, asking if he also denied extorting money and valuables from students in exchange for raising their grades. The headmaster lost his composure and screamed at Kai, asking who had taught him this nonsense to come and bother him with it. At that moment, a voice came from the audience, as the student Gloomy confessed that she was the one who told him. Gloomy stood up and began her testimony. She explained that she and the 2 students who had died had all received the same offer from the headmaster. She admitted that she tried to hide it until the end, but after seeing the others who were in her same situation choose death, she could no longer bear it. Upon hearing this confession, the J-Mill family representative confronted Headmaster Jabiru again, demanding an explanation for what was happening. He declared that if what the student was saying was true, the headmaster was finished. The representative threatened that he would order him to be dragged to the royal palace immediately. The headmaster broke down and began to beg for mercy and for them to give him a moment. Here, Kai intervened, interrupting the representative with an apology and asking him to wait a moment. He then turned to Gloomy, apologizing to her, but asked her to speak once more. Gloomy agreed, and explained that the wounds she had received from the headmaster had been bandaged by someone else. Gloomy continued her testimony, saying that this person told her he understood all her pain, that everything would be all right, and promised to offer help, but she soon realized she wasn't the only one. She revealed that the other female students who had died were also victims being manipulated by that same person. Gloomy then turned towards the faculty and directed her accusation. The girl wondered if that was the case, directing her question to Professor Joy. Professor Joy was completely shocked, and he suddenly stood up, screaming that it wasn't true, and that all he had done was try to console his wounded female students. Headmaster Jabiru found his chance to attack, and screamed at Professor Joy, calling him a bastard, and wondering how he, as a teacher, could exploit his students to satisfy his own ego, and declared that Joy had been the biggest problem all along. Joy responded angrily, accusing the headmaster of being the one who committed the vile acts and was now trying to frame him for them. Jabiru scoffed, wondering who had then taken that opportunity to exploit the female students. The noble representative interrupted them with a deafening shout to stop. He ordered the guards to take both of them, Jabiru and Joy, away immediately. As the guards were leading them away, The headmaster kept screaming that this couldn't be happening and it was all a lie, while Professor Joy begged them to believe him and that it wasn't true. As Professor Joy passed by Kai, Kai calmly stopped him. He asked him to know just one thing, that he had not just killed people. Joy wondered in confusion what he meant. Kai explained that he had not only killed Kesha and Melina, but also the future and the potential they had dreamed of. Professor Joy looked confused, wondering about the meaning of this. The noble representative shouted at the guards, questioning their slowness, and ordered them to take Jabiru and Joy away immediately. As the guards were leading Headmaster Jabiru away, Kai looked at Rako and asked him to keep his promise. Later, as Kai and Kanto were walking away from the hall, Kanto commented that Kai knew everything from the beginning. Kai replied calmly, asking him if he hadn't told him before that there was no need to worry. Kanto complained that he could have told him the plan sooner, but Kai simply said that things went well in the end. Kanto reluctantly agreed, and expressed his hope that the new headmaster and math professor would be respectable people. Kai changed the subject, saying that what was more important now was when she would arrive. Kanto looked and spotted her, confirming that she had arrived now. Gloomy was standing in front of the academy holding her bag. She approached them and told them they really didn't have to come to see her off. Kanto expressed his regret, wishing they could continue traveling together. He reminded her that he had heard the academy had offered for her to stay, but Gloomy refused, explaining that the place held too many painful memories that she didn't think she could bear. Kanto handed her an envelope, so Gloomy asked what it was. Kanto told her that she was a smart girl, and that if she had nowhere else to go, she should head to the merchant guild run by his father. He assured her that his father would be happy to offer her a job. Gloomy thanked him for offering his help. Gloomy then turned to Kai and thanked him sincerely, and with a radiant smile she thanked him again for saving her life. After Gloomy left, Kai and Kanto were walking together. Kanto mentioned that because of this whole incident, the scholarship system at the academy would change a little. He explained that usually, a student would be dismissed from the scholarship as soon as their grades dropped, but the new system would give students another chance until the next exam. Kai simply listened. Kanto said there was one thing that intrigued him, and he asked Kai what exactly he had said to Rako in the trial hall. Kai replied that he had told Rako he would solve the problem in exchange for Rako doing him a few favors. Kanto was shocked and shouted, wondering how he dared to ask for favors from Rako. Kanto asked what those favors were. Kai was silent for a moment, then revealed that the favor he had asked for was... The scene shifts to a classroom early in the morning, where Rako was asleep on his desk. The students were whispering, wondering how this was driving them crazy, and why on earth Rako was showing up to class at this early hour. Another student agreed, saying she knew how they felt. Rako suddenly woke up to find Kai standing in front of him. Kanto was still shocked by his presence in the class, so Kai reminded him that promises must be kept. The scene flashes back to their conversation during the trial, where Kai's request was for Rako to attend classes seriously. Rako was dumbfounded by this request. Kai explained to him that this suicide incident happened because of the exorbitant tuition fees and that if Rako had any conscience, he should attend every single time. Back in the classroom, Kanto was still whispering to Kai that he couldn't believe Rako was actually keeping his promise, and complained that they were now forced to come early because of him. Kanto let out a soft laugh, so Rako lost his temper and hit Kanto on the head with a book, which startled Kanto. Rako pointed his finger at him and threatened that if he laughed again, he would be dead. Kanto froze in terror. At that moment, Kai reached his seat and thanked Rako for keeping his promise. Rako looked at him with disdain, thinking to himself that he had expected a huge request, but Kai was just a weirdo. He wondered what benefit Kai got from him attending class. Rako sat down, thinking that this kind of commitment was extremely annoying and exhausting. But still, he admitted to himself that Kai had indeed helped him, so he figured he could play along with him for a while. As Kai was walking down one of the academy's corridors, he noticed a commotion in the hall. When he stopped, someone appeared behind Kai, and suddenly that person hit him on the head. Kai groaned and asked angrily why he hit him as soon as he saw him. Shanos appeared before him, calling Kai's name. Shanos yelled at him, calling him a bastard, and accusing him of causing all sorts of trouble now. He asked if he was doing all this just to mess with him. Kai denied it, which infuriated Shanos, who wondered about the reason for his actions, reminding him that he knew full well how dangerous it was to interfere with the duties of Grim Reapers. Kai replied calmly that he didn't remember interfering with any Reaper's duties, and that all he did was act from a human perspective and do only what any human could do. Shanos hit Kai on the head again, making Kai groan and ask why he kept hitting him. Shanos replied that he was annoying, and described him as having been annoying as a Grim Reaper, and having become worse as a human. At that moment, they were interrupted by Kanto's voice calling for Kai, and asking what he was doing there. Shanos immediately disappeared. Kanto looked around and asked if someone else was with him, because he thought he saw another shadow. Kai replied that it said this place is haunted. Kanto freaked out, so Kai suggested they leave. As they were walking away, the invisible Shanos was fuming with rage because Kai had described him as a ghost. As they walked, Kanto mentioned that he had heard some guests were coming, and that the academy seemed to be in chaos, and asked Kai if he knew why. Kanto explained that the atmosphere at the academy had been gloomy since the incident with the scholarship students. To change this mood, the administration decided to hold an inauguration ceremony for the new headmaster as a sort of festival. Kai simply said he understood. They arrived at a hall where students were working on festival preparations. A female student shouted, asking them why they were late, asserting that they were short on helping hands. Kanto asked in confusion if their class was assigned a task. The student reminded him that they were responsible for making a statue for the hall, and that she had told him that before. Kanto began to grumble, wondering how they were supposed to make something so difficult and wishing they had chosen another task. But the student ordered him to stop complaining and start working. Rako was lying on a nearby bench, so Kai asked him if he intended to help. Kai approached Rako, who asked him why he should do that. Kai reminded him that this event was considered a type of class. Kanto was watching the scene from afar and commented to himself that Rako was still listening to Seian's requests, and that this was truly unexpected. Kanto laughed silently, so Rako threw a coin that hit Kanto hard on the head. Kanto shouted that throwing coins was going too far. Kanto froze when Rako asked him in a menacing tone who had given him permission to laugh. The female student also commented that throwing coins was dangerous. Kai intervened, saying there was something that had been puzzling him for a while, and he asked what these statues were supposed to be. The students answered together hesitantly with words like agony, pain, love. Kai replied, asserting that those names were wonderful, and his classmates asked if that was really true. But in the next moment, the students collapsed when they realized Kai only meant the titles, and that their sculptures were truly failures. Kai looked at them coolly and asked them again what exactly they were trying to make. They replied with the same words, agony, pain, and love. When Kai turned to leave, a student jumped behind him, shouting that he was just kidding, and begged him not to go. The student continued to plead, explaining that they were genuinely short on helping hands and begged him to help them. Later, Kanto was standing in awe before a huge and masterfully crafted statue, commenting that this was what Kai made after the class asked him for help. The statue depicted a complex and lifelike scene. Other students commented that the quality of the work was insane, and that they had never seen a statue with such vitality. Kanto looked at Kai and asked him if there was anything he couldn't do. Kai told him that it was time for the ceremony to begin. Kanto agreed, saying they should head inside as well. They entered the grand hall, which was decorated and crowded with guests. Kanto looked around, mesmerized, and commented that this scene was unbelievable. Kanto pointed out that nobles and dignitaries from all over the country and even members of the royal family were present, and that every important figure was there. But Kai was looking in another direction, thinking that he was surprised to see Rako here first. The announcer, the new professor, stood on a balcony, thanked everyone for waiting, and announced the start of the inauguration ceremony. The announcer continued his speech, declaring that he would now introduce the newly appointed headmaster of Gotha Academy, Lord Taylor Rubison. The audience was completely shocked, and someone shouted, wondering if that was Taylor, expressing his disbelief. Kanto expressed his shock, saying, "Oh my god." He looked at Kai in confusion and asked if he knew this person. Kanto turned to Kai in amazement, wondering how he could not know who Lord Taylor was. Kanto enthusiastically explained that Taylor was the former head of the Sage's Tower, the person who is said to hold all the knowledge in the world. Kai showed no reaction. Kanto felt frustrated and muttered, wondering why he bothered explaining, adding that Taylor is still nicknamed the Sage of Sages. Kanto added that he had only heard rumors about him and had never seen him in person before, and he wondered what he would look like. At that moment, footsteps began to approach on the balcony. Kanto turned. The new headmaster appeared. Kai stared at the man who appeared, and thought to himself that that person was... Kanto continues speaking, explaining that he only heard rumors about the new headmaster and doesn't know what he looks like, wondering about his nature. Kai looks on in confusion, and thinks to himself that that person is... Kanto notices Kai's astonishment and asks him if this man looks familiar to him, and asks him to imagine him in older, shabbier clothes. Kanto suddenly screams in shock, wondering if this is the old man they met at the tavern. He admits that he had a hunch he wasn't just an ordinary old man, but he never imagined he could be the head of the Sage's Tower. On the balcony, the new headmaster, Taylor, greets them, expressing his thanks to those who called an old man like him to work. He tells the students that if they face any difficulties, they can come find him, as he always welcomes chatting with young people. Meanwhile, Rako was upset, thinking that he wouldn't be able to drink that alcohol at the tavern anymore. Kai notices that Rako already knew the headmaster's identity, as he isn't surprised at all. Suddenly, a new voice is heard apologizing for being late. Kanto wonders who is arriving, while Kai recognizes the voice in shock. The arriving man apologizes again for the delay, and Headmaster Taylor welcomes him, assuring him it's all right. He then addresses him by his official title, His Highness, Prince Edith. The attendees are astonished, disbelieving that Prince Edith of the Chezarus Empire has attended in person. Kanto looks at him with admiration, thinking that this is the first time he has seen Prince Edith, but he turns to find Kai and Rako crouching on the floor and asks them in confusion what they are doing. Kai was trying to hide, wondering if the prince's position was so comfortable that it allowed him to attend such events, and worrying that Prince Edith might resent him for leaving for the academy without informing him. Then he suddenly realizes that Kanto said, 2. He turns to find Rocco crouching beside him, also in a hiding position. He asks Rocco in confusion what he is doing. Rocco thinks that it's best to avoid troublesome things, referring to the prince. Kai agrees with him for a strange reason, and decides that in that case, Kai and Rocco dash towards the exit, leaving Kanto in shock. Kanto yells after them, asking where they are going, and reminding them that the ceremony is still ongoing. Kanto finds himself alone amidst the stares of the attendees, thinking how rude they are. He tries to catch up to them, wondering about the reason for their sudden departure, and asking them to let him in on it. Rocco was watching Edith as he left, thinking to himself that even his exit is loud and chaotic. Rocco sits on the roof of a building, commenting that the prince lives, thinking he is the best. Headmaster Taylor asks him if he's sure he isn't just jealous of him. Rocco asks sharply about Taylor's sudden use of polite language. The headmaster replies that seeing the prince brought back old memories of when he used to teach them. Rocco comments that Taylor has really gotten old, because he keeps talking about the old days. Taylor laughs, and tells Rocco that his talk makes him sound just like Prince Edith. Headmaster Taylor approaches Rocco, explaining that he has a message from Prince Edith. He tells him that the prince asks him to stop acting out of character, and that hiding doesn't suit him, and he should immediately return to his old rotten self. Rocco gets annoyed and calls the prince a bastard, while Taylor comments with a smile that they, Rocco and Edith, haven't really changed. Meanwhile, in the dining hall, Kai, Seian, was eating his food, so Kanto asked him how he still had an appetite in such a situation. Kai was surprised, so Kanto pointed to the hostile, deathly glares the other students, Elnis's group, were directing at them. He asked jokingly if they would sue them for straining their eyes, but the nervous Kanto warned him this wasn't the time for jokes, and warned him that boy, Elnis, looked so angry he might start trouble. After that, Kanto took out a letter, explaining to Kai that he had something to show him, and that it was a letter from his father. The letter contained worrying news about Gloomy, as his father mentioned that something had happened to her. It seems she was terrified of something recently to the point that she could no longer live her life normally. Kanto wondered what could frighten her to this extent, while Kai replied that he didn't know. He decided they must go see her themselves, and Kanto agreed. The latter felt responsible because he was the one who sent her there, and that if something was wrong, he had to check. He stood up to go get an exit permit for them. Kai noticed that Rocco didn't get up with him, so he asked him why he was still sitting and told him he had to come with them. At this, Rocco, who was sitting with them, objected, shouting, "And why me?" The scene flashes back a little, to a previous conversation, showing Kai reminding Rocco that accompanying him was one of the conditions of their deal, for help in the trial, despite Rocco's protest that coming here was enough. He lists the conditions, jokingly, like sleeping in his room and eating meals together, which drove Rocco to scream, denouncing the number of these conditions. Returning to the present, Rocco yells that this trip has nothing to do with those conditions, and demands they leave him alone, wondering why he should get involved in something that doesn't concern him. Kai confronts him, surprised how he can say it doesn't concern him. He reminds him that Gloomy is the one who helped clear his name more than anyone else, and explained that she gave that difficult testimony in front of everyone for his sake, and that this is the reason that forced her to leave the academy. He continues that she is in trouble now, and that if Rocco had an ounce of conscience or humanity, he couldn't pretend it doesn't concern him. And before he could finish his threat, Rocco slams the table and yells his agreement to go. Rocco gets up angrily to leave, but he sees Kanto laughing at him, so he raises the plate to throw it at him. Kanto yells at him to at least leave the plate alone. Kanto screams in pain as Rocco throws the plate at him, to a dark room, where Gloomy was sitting on her bed in terror. She was holding her head and screaming, begging something to stop chasing her. And in the Merchant Guild, Kanto's father was thinking about Gloomy, whom his son had introduced him to. He was impressed with her because she was quick and good at her job, but he noticed she looked very pale lately. He was also worried about the repeated reports of her screaming and running out of her room, wondering what the real problem was. While he is in his office, there is a knock on the door, and he gives permission to enter. Gloomy opens the door, greets Mr. Calrow, Kanto's father, and tells him she brought the documents he requested. Mr. Calrow welcomes her, noting that she came at the right time, but he suddenly stops and is surprised. He expresses his shock at her pale skin. Gloomy tries to downplay it, claiming she is fine and has been suffering from lack of sleep recently, but he insists she must go and rest if she is sick. While she is doing so, he notices something lying on the floor at her feet. He wonders if that is a doll. Upon seeing the doll, Gloomy freezes in place, wondering in terror how it could be here. She breaks down, screaming that she is sure she burned it. He is stunned by her reaction, and as she falls unconscious to the floor, Calrow screams her name. The next morning, as he wonders who is knocking on the door at this early hour, he finds his son Kanto, accompanied by Rocco and Kai, Seian, announcing his arrival. His father asks him about the identity of the two young men with him, and Kanto replies that they are his friends, and that they also know Gloomy and came with him when they heard the news. He welcomes them and invites them in. As they walk, Kalro tells his son that Gloomy suddenly lost consciousness and collapsed yesterday. When Kanto asked him the reason, he replied that he doesn't know either. He leads them to her room, explaining that he put her in bed to rest. He knocks on the door and asks if she is still sleeping, and wonders if she hasn't woken up yet. He decides to enter, announcing that he will just go in for a moment, and opens the door to find the room dark and Gloomy lying on the bed. Kai asks the others to let him enter for a moment and steps towards the bed where Gloomy is lying motionless. He kneels beside her and holds her wrist. Kanto asks him worriedly what is happening and if Gloomy is sick. He tells him in a serious tone that he cannot find her pulse. Kanto is deeply shocked. Later in a cemetery, the four, Kalro, Kanto, Rako, and Kai, sit on a bench, bewildered. Kanto was holding his head in despair, wondering what the hell happened. Kalro explains that the healer mentioned her body was extremely weak and that she suffered a heart attack. He adds that the severe psychological shock she experienced is what likely caused her heart to stop. Kai then turns to Kalro, asking him to confirm what happened yesterday, that Gloomy fainted after seeing a doll, and asks where that doll is now. He replies that he isn't sure, as he remembers seeing it in the corner of the room when he left after putting Gloomy to bed, suggesting one of the staff members put it there. Kai comments that this is strange, because he didn't see any doll in the room when he checked it. Mr. Kalro agrees that it is strange, as he also doesn't think the doll was there today. Kai tells him they have to return to the academy now, but asks Mr. Kalro to contact them if he finds that doll, which Kalro agreed to. And as they were on their way back, Kai was thinking to himself that the matter of that doll truly bothers him. As he reached the academy gate, someone suddenly called out to him. It was Mr. Telshin, the swordsmanship professor, running towards him enthusiastically, announcing that he came at the perfect time and that it was good he waited for him. Kai was surprised and asked who he was. Kanto, who was present, explained to him that this is the swordsmanship professor and that he doesn't know him because he hasn't attended his class yet. Professor Telshin enthusiastically grabbed Kai's hands and asked him about his relationship with that man and how he knows him. Before the surprised Kai could answer, the professor interrupted him, saying this wasn't the time, and asked him to follow him, pulling him along. Kanto and Rako were watching the scene. Kanto wondered what would make a professor act this way, while Rako asked him if Kai had caused another problem. Kanto seemed excited, so he and Rako decided to follow them. The two sped off after Kai and the professor. Professor Telshin arrived at the training ground panting, announcing to the person standing there that he had brought Kai with him. Kai wondered about the reason for this commotion, before recognizing the person standing in front of him. Kai was surprised to see Jiran. Jiran greeted Kai, noting that it had been a while. He asked him the reason for his coming here. Jiran hesitated, explaining that it was a bit difficult to talk about the matter in this place, while Kanto and Rako were eavesdropping. Professor Telshin noticed them, and assured Mr. Jiran that he would get rid of them so they could talk comfortably. Despite Kanto's protest that he was curious, the professor dragged them away. After they left, Kai asked Jiran again about the matter. Jiran told him that it was about Abli village. He asked him seriously if he had come to take the poison. Jiran denied it, explaining that it was the complete opposite, and that they no longer needed the poison. When he asked him what he meant, Jiran revealed the horrific truth to him. The residents of Abli village are dying one after another, and that most of the deaths were due to heart attacks.